the main question ultimately is, will Violet be strong enough soon enough to challenge Theophanie? And then in parentheses, I wrote, and Xaden.
No.
Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Bookdown Fantasy Podcast.
I'm Addison.
I'm Lorraine, and we are two best friends who explore the world of fantasy through book shows and movies, but with a heavy emphasis on books. Today we are covering Onyx Storm chapters 44 through 49. The squad has returned for their debrief in Basgiath, and lucky for them, King Tari has forbidden any punishment now that Arik's true identity is out of the bag. We also had some cute moments with Sawyer getting back on Sleeg, but per usual with the good, there is always some bad because those wards are failing and it's only a matter of time before Theophanie comes back. As a quick reminder, we are a spoiler-free podcast. We have only read up to the chapters we are covering and no further, so we have no idea what's to come in the rest of the book. With that being said, we will be discussing chapters 44 through 49 specifically, but it is likely that references to the previous chapters as well as Fourth Wing and Iron Flame will come up as well. If you are not caught up, then make sure you stop here and come back when you are. Furthermore, we would like to remind everyone that this is an adult podcast where you will have adult conversations. Explicit language or potentially triggering topics may be discussed, so please be mindful of that and adjust accordingly. Housekeeping. If you are reading along with us, the next week's episode will cover chapters 50 through 55. And second, if you are a fan of our Onyx Storm coverage, then the very best way for you to support us is to take a moment to leave us a review. You can do that on Apple Podcasts with a star review or a physical review, which we do feature on our Instagram, so that's fun and all. Or if you're on Spotify, just put in a quick little star review. Also, as we get closer to the end of our Onyx Storm coverage, we do want to start letting people know that we plan to do a theories episode so we can deep dive a little bit further and wrap up our predictions and everything moving, well, as we wait for like 2 years or 2 years plus, I guess, before we get the next book.
I was going to say, moving into what? Moving into the nothingness, staring into the void.
Moving into the void.
Yeah, exactly.
So yeah, if you guys have any theories that you'd love to hear us talk about, or if you have theories that you want to present yourself, then definitely send us an email or DM us on Instagram. Otherwise, we'll be working away, compiling a little list of things we want to talk about on our own.
Yeah, the sooner the better, because the theories episodes requires a lot of research. So the sooner you let us know what you want us to talk about, the better it will be, because we'll have more time to put on our tinfoil hats and surround ourselves with red string and pictures.
All right, let's get into the episode. We will start with the book report, where Addison will summarize each chapter. Next, we will convene a meeting of the assembly, where we will deep dive, analyze, and theorize each chapter. Finally, to end the episode, we will share our favorite moments from the set of chapters discussed. With that being said, Addison, please give us the book report.
Emotionally. Chapter 44. After 12 hours of grueling interrogation, Violet and the quest squad are released to their respective posts without punishment, thanks to the benevolence of King Tari and his gratitude for Ark's safe return. The squad settles in for battle brief, and this one is a doozy. Most of Krovla has been painted red, and it seems like every day they are adding more red to the map. Navarre asks the class to discuss where they would strategically place the 40,000 troops Zehyllna promised, but things take a turn for the frightening when Navarre and Kiandra demand the class analyze the fall of Zuniva. Turns out, all you need to take out a queen, an entire city, and 25,000 citizens is 12 wyvern, 12 venin, and an unstoppable fire. Battle brief ends, leaving Violet to worry about how she, a cadet who has not even finished her second year, could contend with Theophanie, a seemingly immortal being who has had centuries to hone her signet. But the blows keep coming because Riddick insists the squad goes to see Zehyllna, where he makes Violet come clean about Xaden turning venin. Chapter 45. We're stuck in another one of Violet's venin nightmares with the sage, or is it Xaden's nightmare? Or both? More on that later. Violet awakes from someone's nightmare, and our girl is too worked up with worries about Theophanie and Xaden to sleep, and she grabs a pen and paper and decides to try one of Xaden's own techniques. Writing a love letter. Later that day, everyone is on the flight field learning a new maneuver called a battle mount. After learning exactly what a battle mount entails, Violet is like, hell nah, I can't do that. But Daddy Taryn is all like, you will, it just won't look like that. Turns out Taryn was exactly right because our girl did the damn thing, although it was a little unorthodox. Class ends and everyone heads off the field, leaving Violet and Xaden blissfully alone, and she gives him a thoughtful birthday present. Happy birthday, Xaden! But the happy moment is short-lived. One, because Xaden is still being big-time broody, and two, Felix arrives and tells them the wards in Eurasia aren't just faltering, they are straight up failing. Chapter 46. 3 weeks have gone by and it's all signet training with Felix, weightlifting with Imogen, and eating for Violet. But while Violet is getting better and stronger, the rest of the world is going to hell in a handbasket. The venin are closing in. Xaden is still broody, and Indarna is also, well, broody. As the squad walks through the halls of Basgiath, they are stopped when they hear an altercation between Llewellyn and the Duke of Chaldeer. They begin to argue about Tyrrendor opening her borders to Poromiel citizens, and things get heated, even more so when Xaden and Halden both appear and begin to argue. Well, Halden is warning and Xaden is informing. Before things get physical, everyone is shocked when shadows appear, but they aren't from Xaden, they're from Lynx. And who is that, you might ask? Excellent question. Apparently, he's in the squad and has just been there in the background the whole time. Who knew? Xaden talks Lynx through it, and the squad takes Lynx to Car, leaving Xaden and Violet behind. The conversation does not go well, ending with Xaden deciding he will leave Basgiath to serve Tyrrendor despite all of Violet's pleas and arguments for him to stay. But the tough talks don't stop there. Llewellyn, sensing that all was not well between them, tries to offer some advice on finding the balance between their relationship, the province, and their personal needs. Xaden flies out 2 hours later. Chapter 47. It's 4:30 in the morning and Violet and Sawyer are on the flight field together. Sawyer has been engineering his prosthetic in hope of flying to Eurasia with the squad, and he's almost there. He just needed a little help with the mounting part. With the support of Violet and Sleek, our boy is successfully able to mount and find his seat, shedding actual happy tears. The squad celebrates from a distance, and Riddick gives everyone a hug whether they like it or not. The squad makes it to Eurasia without incident, and everyone is excited to have the night off, to unwind and see their families. Violet takes her belongings to the room she shares with Xaden and contemplates their situation, but is interrupted when Brennan arrives. Violet enjoys a brief moment of peace before Brennan gives her some bad news. First, he knows Xaden is a venin, and second, he can't mend him. But all Violet heard was that Xaden hadn't given up hope yet. Chapter 48. That night, Violet is in her room working on her homework for Felix and researching a cure for Xaden. If he hadn't given up, she wouldn't either. Violet is interrupted by a knock at the door, and to our absolute surprise and delight, Zaddy is home. Violet and Xaden waste no time and engage in some steamy foreplay that is constantly interrupted and delayed by Xaden giving Violet 50 million chances to change her mind and run. But Violet refuses because she knew what they both really needed. Each other. No more waiting. Chapter 49. The wait was finally over. Turns out Xaden consistently does some of his best work in chairs. Lucky for Violet, she'll get to find out what he can do in the bathtub, then the dresser, then the bed. And that concludes the book report.
I think I wrote at the end for this sort of chapters, I think we have a new my house, my chair, my woman.
Girl, get out of here with that. Nothing will top that. Nothing. That line's going down in history.
All right. Well, thank you for those awesome summaries. And now let's convene our meeting with the assembly, starting with some overarching thoughts.
I didn't have many, guys, because in a weird way, a lot happened and kind of nothing happened. So I was surprised that this set of chapters was surprisingly emotional. I did not expect for there to be so many heartfelt moments and tough conversations. I actually really liked it. I feel like a lot of the book has just been action, action, action. Don't get me wrong, that's exciting, but this was a nice reprieve from that. I actually really just enjoy reading about the squad being together at Basgiath or in Eurasia. I miss everybody being together.
Yeah, I agree. They've been missing for so much of it because it's mostly just been Violet or Riddick once he was added into the quest squad. So, yeah, Rhee and Sawyer and everybody's back together.
I know. Every time they're all together and Riddick is like, this is right. And I'm like, yeah, this is how it's supposed to be.
That's so true.
My last overarching thought is I actually have a theory to present in this episode that I am moderately proud of. However, I should probably set expectations. It's not groundbreaking or earth-shattering and not super relevant to the plot. It's relevant to the book, of course, but I was really excited about it because I was like, whoa. I have something I put together in my mind. So does everyone prepare for that?
Ooh, I'm excited. I don't know what this is. Typically, like I finish my notes first and Addison is after.
I'm
so
behind always
Well, no,
fine.
but just like
That's what she's trying to
responding
say.
to things. And so then I don't always know what you're going to say until we record the episode.
I know, I like that.
But you know everything that I'm going to say, so I guess.
I know. We use invisible ink. I like to keep Lorraine guessing, like to keep her on her toes. And also, I'm just always behind. So
I didn't really have any overarching thoughts, but something did just come to me because you said this felt very emotional. A, yes, that's very true. And B, I feel like that means something bad is going to happen. Whenever we get like a set of emotional set of chapters coming together and everybody's like, wow, this is nice. It's like the calm before the storm, you know?
Is it the calm before the Onyx Storm?
Absolutely. Or Theophanie's fucking storm. Who knows?
Oh my God. I know.
Okay, that is all of our overarching thoughts. So let's get into our actual chapters, starting with chapter 44, the excerpt. This was unsent correspondence from Colonel Agatha Mayfair, a royal archivist to the King of Navarre. In it, Colonel Mayfair was working on finding some law that would supersede the unification scroll. Whenever this excerpt was created, the temporary ability to consolidate all provincial armies under Queen Elandra in 207 AU expired after the Second Erasure Accord was signed. The Second Erasure Accord gave control of all forces back to their individual provinces. Colonel Mayfair recommends a provincial commitment to be drafted to cover the current circumstances. There's also a scratched out part where Colonel Mayfair warns that provinces will likely not agree to raising conscription rates, and that it's best not to anger the Duke of Tyrrendor, aka Xaden, since he now commands the largest portion of Navarre's army.
First and foremost, I have to say that listening to this excerpt read in the audiobook was absolutely hilarious. You can really feel the frustration and exasperation of Agatha. It's like the modern day equivalent of having to give your boss some really bad news in an email.
Yes.
And you just keep typing and deleting and doing that over and over again before you're like, you know what? Fuck it. I'm just going to quit my job. That will be easier than doing this. And that's exactly what it was like.
Yeah, she was not having it.
No.
No.
I feel for her wherever you are, Agatha.
So anyways, this excerpt was most likely written in the current timeline of events since the Second Erasure Accord was just signed a couple months prior, back in Chapter 8. To refresh, this takes place after Violet alters the Basgiath Wardstone and the Accord was signed, allowing Poromiel's flyers to stay in Basgiath and restoring Xaden's title as the Duke of Tyrrendor. In addition, this excerpt most likely occurred just prior to the excerpt from Chapter 40. Where through a public notice, we learn that the conscription rates for Navarre have now been doubled until further notice. Which basically means King Tari didn't give a fuck. He's like, we're raising those rates. Another thing I want to note is this really adds to the precarious balance of Tyrrendor within Navarre. We know Tyrrendor contributes the most people for Navarre's army, but now that command of those forces falls back to the provinces, Xaden has a big-ass army at his command. We know that this point of tension comes back up later when we learn Tyrrendor agrees to take in civilians. And we see that truly, as Hedotus seemed to indicate, Tyrrendor, could very easily become independent again. As we've discussed in previous episodes, they have their own wardstone, they have hatching grounds, they have the biggest army in the kingdom. It really doesn't feel out of the realm of possibility that they could very well secede from Navarre.
While I do think all the evidence you pointed out is spot on as of where we stand currently in the series, I don't see Tyrrendor doing that until after the war is over. As we saw in the conflict with Haldan later on, Tyrrendor needs Navarre and vice versa. Both sides can talk a big game, but no one can actually afford to fight a war on two fronts. And by that, I mean a civil war and a war with venin. If either one tries anything, it really is mutually assured destruction for both. Now, after the war with the venin, that's a whole different story.
Book 4 or 5? Just kidding. No,
I was like, what? I was like, girl, you crazy?
No, this is probably going to keep going until the very end.
Yeah, that'll be like the epilogue, Tyrrendor seated after the war with the venin, and Violet and Xaden lived happily ever after.
Yes. So my last point from this excerpt is just that it really highlights how dire everything is, considering Xaden is freaking venin. I didn't want to think about this, but what a win it would be for the venin if Xaden does reach his limit and gets called by a sage or maven. That would be catastrophic for this content.
Catastrophic. Cannot imagine the worst person in the world for that to happen with, right? Even just thinking about it, I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah, bad news. I really do wonder, will we get that marriage between Violet and Xaden? It kind of seems like a great time to do so because it would add an extra layer of protection. We see Xaden is seemingly okay and has control in this set of chapters for now, but just can't shake the feeling that things aren't actually going to stay good and well with Xaden and his penitence.
That is a totally fair concern. I mean, look what he did with Halden. He basically usurped the authority of the king, which in this instance, he was using his powers for good. But if he wants to use them for evil, I shudder to think what damage he could do. It worked out well now because he's like, I'm going to help civilians. But what if Xaden takes over and he's like, everybody will send me all of their dragons and then I'll train them? You know, that's crazy. But you get what I'm saying, right? Like,
yeah.
The potential for evil is really there.
So anyways, to get into the main part of this chapter, the quest squad is separated and individually grilled with questions. The one saving grace is that King Tari was so grateful to have Auric back that he's forbidden any form of punishment.
Is it just me, or does this feel a little bit like a cop-out writing-wise? I'm not mad about it. I don't want the squad to be punished, but it did seem a little convenient.
Oh, 100%. The entire time they were worried they're going to get court-martialed and punished for disobeying orders, and then they get back and they're like, oh, it's fine.
Yeah, don't even worry about it. It's totally fine, girl. Go off. I just kind of was like, that was really convenient.
So I did find it interesting, and I'm probably just being a little bit suspicious, but Violet thinks they're being questioned for so long that she starts to worry if they're looking for holes in our stories or if they suspect we had more than rare text to guide us. I don't know exactly what this means, but I'm wondering if Navarre knows something specifically, and that's why they are really trying to get all these details, or if it's purely just out of curiosity because they really don't have any information about any of the Isles. I guess we also have to remember that no scribe accompanied them to keep record of what happened, so there was no neutral accounting of the events. And so all of Navarre and I guess whoever was there on Poromiel's end only had the words of the riders and flyers to go off of, so maybe it was just that.
I would also imagine, based on what we know about the scribes, they want the most accurate account possible. And we know that everyone on the quest squad will have different perspectives, especially because a lot of the time they were split up. For example, in Umbriel, only a few of them went to the challenge, and then in Hedotus, only a few of them went to the dinner. I imagine they're reviewing the details repeatedly and cross-checking with others to note any discrepancies so they can ask for clarification too. But also possible Colonel Atos is like, let's catch them so I can get them in trouble for something else. So, or both.
I just was a little suspicious just because the whole theme of this book has been like, nothing we know is true. Information has been altered. And so part of me was like, they're probably just curious. But the other part of me was wondering, are they looking for them to say something that they are trying to keep out of record or something like that? So
when Papa Sorngirl said, trust no one but Mira, man, he really meant it. Because I really pretty much only trust
I don't
Mira.
trust anyone either. Yeah. But anyways, I also did take some satisfaction in knowing that Markham didn't get to see shit.
Yeah.
Violet thinks I get to see Markham's face twist with jealousy. I've seen things he never will. Touch pieces of history he didn't know existed. Imagine being the curator of the scribe quadrant and some second-year cadet just gets to travel outside the continent and see everything that he will never see.
Oh, I love to see Markham unhappy. I loved when Violet told him he had the credibility of a drunkard and the integrity of a rat, and I love that she was able to rub this in his face. Any chance to stick it to Markham? Do it.
Yes, absolutely. We do get a quick timeline update. It is now March 28th by the time the questioning is done, and we learn that Mira and Garrick are sent back out to the front. Drake leaves for Corden, and Brennan actually arrives on campus to bed Violet. Xaden is back in scenario meetings, and everyone else just goes back to class. And specifically, we learn that Mira and Garrick are sent out to Dreyfus. The squad sits in battle brief, where they learn, in addition to Seneva, there are many cities that have fallen to venin. As Riddick says, half of Krovla has been painted red while they were away, leaving only the southern tip and the west of Krovla still spared, including Gordon. I definitely think that this plays into the fact that the venin are heading toward Erasia, as we learned later. They're just draining Krovla along the way.
I agree. It seems like the venin's strategy is to keep sending Wyvern on patrol to see how weakened Erasia's wards are, while they focus on taking control of Krovla and moving their troops. Troops? That sounds weird. Do venin have troops? Whatever you call them. Well, they, I don't actually know how many venin there are. I feel like in reality, there's 50 venin tops. I don't know. But
I feel like there's a lot of them.
Well,
maybe not, though. Because
I
each
don't know.
one is probably the equivalent of hundreds of troops or something.
I mean, the fact that 12 of them took down Suniva, I don't know. Anyway, while they move them closer to the border, so they will be ready to attack when the wards completely falter. And that's kind of what it seems like the overall venin strategy is.
Kat also adds that Navarre is still not taking civilians, which is wild. I sort of understand why Navarre is still refusing, considering supply shortages, but come on. At this point, it's kind of insane that they won't let people in.
Well, especially because it's not like Navarre is currently experiencing supply shortages. They're just worried about it. So I do understand their concern. However, I really feel like they aren't thinking strategically about this. They should have negotiated with Takaris to conscript refugees to help fight in the war. It also would have benefited them greatly for them to set up some kind of system. That way they could control the flow of where people come in and where they get sent. And that way they can spread them out across Navarre to help prevent one area from being hit too hard supply-wise. If people are literally fleeing for their lives, at some point Poromiel citizens won't ask. They will just push their way in, which would actually cause chaos, disruption in supply chains, etc. So it's like if they just would have handled it strategically from the beginning, it would have made a lot more sense.
I also wanted to note that Auric now has guards accompanying him everywhere, which was likely courtesy of King Tari, now that his true identity has been revealed.
I liked when Devera told the guards, please make yourselves as uncomfortable as possible.
Devera begins a discussion of where to station the 40,000 troops Zehyllna agreed to give them, and has decided the best course of action would be to put a third of them in the south of Krovla and a third in the west of Krovla, as Dane suggested, to protect King Takaris, and the final one-third should be spread out along the outposts of Navarre's borders, as Devera adds. Violet notes that stationing troops at the outposts would only be necessary if the wards are at risk, specifically the arsenal of alloy daggers. A disruption of the power supply could cause the wards to fail. So I think finally, this officially answers our questions of why the wards have been weakening and faltering along the border. I think we had speculated it was related to daggers, but this was like our official reveal that, yes, it's about the daggers.
And I think this conversation is one half of the pieces we need to solve the puzzle. The other is what we learn in chapter 46. So just a quick refresher on the wards and how they work. Navarre has an active ward stone that provides a natural magical protective barrier around a certain percentage of Navarre. We don't know the exact endpoint of the quote-unquote natural barriers, but in order to extend the area of land the ward stones protect, Navarre strategically built outposts and created what we call the borders. At each outpost, there's a strategic number of alloy-imbued weapons, which naturally stretch the boundaries of the wards. It is never specified how many alloy weapons have to be there, but a certain amount must be present in order for the extension of the wards to function. This is why it was always problematic when the flyers would raid the outposts for weapons to fight with the venin, because it would weaken the wards to the point where they would falter until more alloy weapons were restored. So with that in mind, in chapter 46, when Llewellyn, Xaden, Halden, and the Duke of Chaldeer are arguing, the Duke of Chaldeer says, we have already weakened the outposts by stripping them of all but the necessary alloy, and look what that got us in Suniva. This here confirms Violet's fear that leadership is worried there could be a disruption in the power supply, which would cause the wards to fail. It sounds like, to me, the outposts were carrying an extra amount of alloyed weapons to bolster the wards, and leadership decided to strip the outposts of any extra alloy weapons to arm Suniva and the rest of Poromiel. And now the outposts have just enough to keep the wards up. And so my suspicion is that is where the 6 cases of daggers came from that were in Suniva when Suniva fell. Also possible they just produced some and sent them there. But those things combined give us a better picture of where Navarre is at defensively. And they're in a precarious place, honestly.
Right. And I guess knowing what we learn about palladium and stuff later, I would imagine that they can't produce enough alloy weapons to keep up with the demand, especially if, like you said, they're needing to arm Poromish cities and places as well because of the treaty that they signed and everything. So things ain't good.
Yeah. Well, the problem for Navarre is they desperately need the weapons, the alloy, to keep the wards up, which is literally what's keeping everyone alive right now. But they also desperately need them to kill the venin. And so it really is like pick your poison. That's probably why we learn later that the king has ordered doubling the output of palladium, because they really need literally as much alloy as humanly possible.
Yes. In addition, this directly foreshadows the information we learned shortly about the shipment of alloy daggers being intercepted by those damn venin.
Those damn venin.
The class continues on to discuss the details of how Suniva fell, and this was extremely interesting. Ultimately, Suniva fell due to a large fire caused by 12 venin and 12 wyvern, resulting in 25,000 people dying. They have information because out of the 4 dragons and riders stationed there, only 1 rider and 2 dragons survived, which, first of all, that is crazy. It is tragic that an entire city was just wiped out by 12 venin.
By 12 venin. I know when I read that, I was like, we are so fucked. Ain't no way we can win this war. Okay, we should just call it. Just call it, honestly.
Done. Second of all, it's noted that the fire was spread with the help of what they think were wind-wielding venin. So then I was just thinking about the context and some of the details, and then I remembered how in Anka, Aura's fire spread super fast because it was like windy as fuck out there. And since the area had been drained, all the buildings were basically just easy kindling. So then I was wondering, what if the venin were actually the ones stirring the wind there, just like they did in Suniva? Theophanie had clearly been there to leave the note, which retrospectively thinking about that, well, I think at the time we were like, somehow she just must have known that they were going to go there. But also, she was probably just fucking watching them because it's clear that she's been watching everything that they're doing. So, I mean, I don't know. But alternatively, what if the venin learned from that experience in Anka that was an easy way to destroy a city really quickly? Professor Keandra even mentions that they have to dissect this venin strategy in Suniva to learn from it, or they will continue to use it in the future as well.
Honestly, I think either one of those is a possibility. We know there were wyvern close by, and I feel like it's mentioned that wyvern tend to stick close-ish to their makers. It's possible that maybe only Theophanie was there with her horde of wyvern, or maybe she had like one other venin. And the reason that they didn't come outright and attack is because we know Theophanie wants Xaden and Violet alive. And so maybe it was kind of like, we'll just wait and see what happens. And maybe we'll kill off the group and then I can swoop in and get Xaden and Violet. So I think that's really possible.
Freaky. Xaden interrupts class with Bodhi by his side to ask what was in the armory the venin went after. And apparently 6 crates of freshly delivered alloy-hilted daggers were plucked up by the venin. Every single freaking crate.
No. For context, Violet points out that each outpost holds maybe 2 crates max, which means 6 crates is a fuck ton of weapons to lose out on. That is devastating to the war effort.
Yes. In addition, we learned that the daggers were taken only a few hours after they were delivered, which means the venin knew the daggers were coming, and there are traitors in the ranks of Navarre.
I mean, we're not surprised, but still.
We're not. But I mean, at this point, it's very clear that there are multiple traitors within leadership. But it's not just one person feeding some information. There are many people, which is frightening.
That's exactly what I wrote. Navarre quite literally teaches the writers tactical battle strategy, and I think it's notable that she specifically says we have traitors in our rank, traitors as in plural, right? Even she thinks that it's likely that there's at least 2, if not more.
So next, they continue on to discuss how the venin infiltrated undetected, and I was like, oh fuck. We learned that Thunderstorms are common in the area at this time, and the venin literally flew within the clouds of the storm, aka Theophanie was among them to control any natural lightning strikes that would happen during the storm. And as we love to say, our souls left our bodies at this point. We already figured Theophanie was strong as fuck and has likely been alive for several centuries, but to just have it like laid out in front of you of just how much she can actually do is crazy. It's
Terrifying. Terrifying. Yeah. Also, I hate to do it, but I think we have to add something else to our watch list. Storms. I do not trust any storms now. I feel like this underlying threat has been laid. Any storm could be created by Theophanie, and or she could help navigate a bunch of wyvern venin through a storm if it's organic.
Right.
And I just want to point out, which we'll talk about when we get there is a storm going on in chapter 48, 49. It's raining outside.
Oh, yeah. Violet made that comment. She's like, the storm or something outside, like it's inviting me to play. And I was like,
bitch, that ain't no storm. That's Theophanie. She's outside waiting for you. She's waiting for you to get it on, and then she's going to call you out there.
Well, is that like a power calling to power kind of thing, between Violet's power and Theophanie's power? And that's why she can like kind of sense it, is because, I mean, we see that they have similar signets. Like they're supposed to be the balance of each other magic wise. So along a similar line of thinking with, power calling to power, etc. This is really important to note in terms of Violet's potential with her lightning signet as well. It's clear that her signet is growing. We've kind of talked about the thunder happening in Umbriel and stuff as well. And it's been noted in several different scenes that in addition to lightning, we have thunder accompanying it now. And it seems pretty likely that this has to do with Violet's signet. But if Theophanie has the ability to control and redirect to natural lightning strikes, then it's definitely likely Violet will be able to do that in the future as well. We still have much more growth to see out of people's signets. The main question ultimately is, will Violet be strong enough soon enough to challenge Theophanie? And then in parentheses, I wrote, and Xaden.
No.
No.
Honestly, absolutely not. I'm sorry. I love Violet, but no fucking way. Now, I'm worried Theophanie is going to attack Violet and Xaden is going to channel Protector. I don't like any of it.
That's true.
Not feeling good about any of it. There's just no way. It would be bad writing if Violet whooped Theophanie's ass. It just
Fair enough.
ain't gonna happen. Someone who's centuries old and has had centuries to do something should be better than someone who's been doing it for a year plus. I don't care how naturally gifted you are.
Ain't no way.
Ain't no way.
So, on top of all of this, Violet realizes that Theophanie must be a maven. So, while this is kind of nice to just like have officially confirmed, because we've been speculating about what Theophanie's rank actually is, it's also really fucking terrifying because she is a general among the venin. Knowing this, do you think it's safe to say that apparating or, distance wielding or whatever you want to call it is something that only a venin of maven status can do?
That's a hard question. I'm going to give a soft yes on that. I think at bare minimum, it's definitely safe to say you have to be a sage or higher. Because remember back in Resin, the sage venin with a staff, he apparates. Now, Violet thought that was a sage. We only get that confirmation from what Violet knows about venin, which at that time is nothing. So it's possible that venin was actually a maven. Like, maybe it was Berwyn. I don't know. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole. I'm not going to go down that rabbit hole.
We do go down that road later, so y'all just wait.
I'm going to say you at least have to be a sage, but realistically, I'm going to say probably maven.
Okay. That's kind of where I'm leading to. So the conversation shifts to a discussion of signets that would have been useful to defend against the venin. Rhee makes a wing leader worthy suggestion that Violet is their best bet, stating Sorengale could have taken out a chunk of the wyvern on approach by striking into that same cloud, including their lightning wielder, as long as they don't know Violet's there. And even more ominously adds that if the venin do know she's there, then Sorengale needs to be better of the two.
Ooh, that hurt to hear.
I am in full panic mode at this point. They have such a small amount of time to prepare, and that is a massive hope to put on Violet's shoulders. I really believe in Violet, but yeah, as we talked about, a second-year cadet who has had maybe a year of training with her signet against a maven venin just
ain't gonna cut it.
Odds are not in her favor. As Violet notes, though, the saving grace, so to speak, is that Theophanie wants to meet with her and wants her alive. So, to continue asking the question we've been asking, what does Theophanie know? Why does she want Violet? Why?
I like how you had that dead look in your eyes when you said that. You're just like, my soul is starting to die. I need answers to live.
I did want to note the part about not knowing that Violet's there. Is this connecting back to the idea of like a shadow wielder working in conjunction with a lightning wielder, like we saw between Xaden and Violet during the Signet sparring class? Now that we also know we have links in addition to Xaden, could one of them possibly like hide Violet? And with my speculation that perhaps Violet will be able to like feel and differentiate between different people's powers, she will be able to make an accurate strike in the dark.
Oh, that's an interesting thought. You know, it's been a while since we circled back on the Xaden and Violet merging their powers into some sort of super weapon. Right. I love that possibility. Unfortunately, I have to say, I don't think our boy Lynx is going to be ready for that anytime soon. I mean, he was literally shaking like a leaf. He was his own shadows, which I'm not knocking Lynx, okay, whoever that is. I don't know who that character is. Sorry, every time he comes up, I think it's so funny because I'm like, who?
We have heard of him as like part of the first year group, but not enough for you to be
barely.
Like, right. The two first years I think of are always just Arik and Sloan. Those are really absolutely. The only two that I'm like, yes, I remember them. And everybody else I'm kind of like,
you're like, who? What?
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel like, sometimes Rebecca Yarros, she's just typing along and she's like, oh shit, we're at the first years. And she has to throw them in there.
Yeah. Also, we've already stated we think we will be meeting Theophanie again before the end of this book. In addition to that, I definitely think we are heading toward another major battle somewhere near Eratia, which I think the closest outpost is Strathis, possibly Corden, or that city called Dason that Professor Keandra mentions in Battle Brief. It feels like that's where we're headed, considering the weakening and failing wards, the falling of Suniva, and this discussion of Violet needing to be the better lightning wielder. Basically, I'm just going to throw up because I hate all of that.
I'm going to start calling you Violet then, because she's always talking about how she feels like she's going to throw up. I actually don't believe this book is going to end on a big battle. I think it would be too similar to how Iron Flame ended. And I don't feel like we have enough time left in the book to get us to that point and through it. However, I do think some shit is going to go down with Theophanie, but in terms of like another big battle like the battle at Basgiath, I don't think that's how it's going to end. When you zoom out and think of the book from like a bird's eye perspective, it seems more like that's what the book is building towards, is this central conflict with Theophanie. But I'm probably wrong. Rebecca will do us dirty.
I feel like they keep mentioning how the wards are failing and like the Wyvern are trying to come through. And I just feel like there's going to be something like maybe a bunch of Wyvern do get through. Maybe it's not like a big battle to the same extent as Basgiath, but there's going to be like some kind of battle happening. We'll see. We just have to keep reading. So post-battle brief, the squad heads down to the archives to meet Xaden and for Violet to finally come clean. Despite agreeing with Rhee's decision to send Violet out in the hypothetical situation, I do appreciate that Sawyer argues against it out of worry for Violet's safety, considering she isn't experienced enough yet to take on a Maven venin, which... fair.
Thank you, Sawyer.
On the other hand, I do wonder if maybe there's a little bit of projection from him, since we know Sawyer has been struggling with feeling ready to get back on Sleek and into battle since losing his leg. That also feels kind of supported by Rhee responding that ultimately it's war and that she thinks it's bullshit he hasn't even thought about flying yet. We do dive a little bit deeper into Sawyer's experience in this set of chapters, and this was one of those instances. I think this quote from Sawyer really stuck out to me, and it says, "Sleek isn't Tyrrendor. I'm not about to ask him to make exceptions for me, not when he risked bonding a repeat in the first place." And that made me a little sad because I was like, you're not just a repeat, Sawyer. You're more than that. He worked so hard and he stuck it out another year just for a chance to bond, and then he actually did. And it's kind of heartbreaking that this still weighs on his confidence, and then combined with him losing a leg and that being like another setback in his eyes. I understand why he's been hesitant to get back to riding. We don't know much about Sleek's personality, but we have yet to see any other dragon make exceptions for their riders aside from Tyrn. And so I'm sure Sawyer worries about his worthiness given his new condition. I do agree with Rhee that his mindset is BS, but I can see why he feels that way.
I feel like Rhee was trying to do some tough love there. Like, oh, if I can't
yeah.
kill him with compassion, I'll do it with tough love. And she's the balance of everything. I think later I have a note about that Rhiannon is just perfection. I love her. But I completely agree. It makes me feel so sad for Sawyer that he thinks so little of himself. I also think it's important to note that this conversation is direct foreshadowing of the conversation we see between him, Violet, and Sleek when Sawyer practices and eventually does figure out how to get back in his seat. Violet suggests a subject change, and Rhiannon asks her what's up with her and Xaden since Violet didn't even crack a smile when she saw him. Violet says he's just brooding, and Riddick says that's a word for it, as he's pressing down a corner of his ice building patch that's come unsewn. I loved this little detail because if you'll recall in Hedotus, when Riddick is punching the cook, he's mostly angry about the knife throw because he hates sewing. And it is just so canon for Riddick that his little patch is coming up because he is probably bad at sewing it.
Oh, yeah.
I thought that was a very nice touch because everything about Riddick, I like it, so I'm going to note it.
They make it down to the archives where Justinia meets them. And honestly, I'm just waiting for Sawyer and Justinia to kiss at this point. They're so cute.
A kiss? I'm ready for them to get married, have kids, settle down, live happily ever after. Justinia's the curator of the scribe quadrant. I'm just ready for it all. I need a happy ending, okay? I'm feeling really demoralized.
Fair enough, yeah. I don't think that's going to get better in this book.
Mm-mm.
Yeah.
No.
We can fantasize. Somebody write some fanfic about Sawyer.
Oh, Sawyer. I love that.
We'll just live in a little fantasy world where things are good for everybody. Justinia also hands Violet a package she intercepted before Atos could get to it since he opens all her mail. Interesting. I brought this up last episode because Atos was the one that hands Violet an opened letter from Theophanie. And I'm like, is he on to Theophanie yet? Is he only interested in Violet's mail, or is he reading other people's mail as well?
To be honest, I think he's probably reading anyone's mail that he finds suspicious. Any of the marked ones, Violet, and probably anyone in her squad. Or maybe even all the Oration writers. I feel like he's reading everybody's mail.
True.
Which, how fun would that be? I would love that, because I'm nosy as hell. I'm nosy. I would love
so illegal.
Well, yeah, I know I wouldn't do that. But in my fantasy world, I get to read everyone's mail and know their business before they do, okay?
Addison is Lady Bridgerton. Or not. Wait, who is it?
Lady Whistledown.
That's who it was, yeah. Sorry.
Absolutely, 1000%. Yes. Lorraine and I both love Bridgerton, and Lady Bridgerton, damn it, Lorraine, you made me do it.
Sorry.
Lady Whistledown is my hero, okay? I love her. Listen.
She's in the know, yeah.
She's in the know.
Okay, so before we figure out what this package was, I was like just a little bit suspicious about what it was. Obviously, we see later it's a nice, cute gift from Xaden, but I was like, is it a bad gift from Theophanie?
Girl, that wasn't a cute gift. That was a sexy gift, okay? Although, I'm not gonna lie, it kind of sucks that Justinia intercepted this particular package because I find the idea of Colonel Atos opening this absolutely hysterical. And I just picture him opening this up and holding it out in front of him. And then like a guard or another member of leadership comes in to discuss something with him. And they just see him holding this scandalous see-through nightgown. And they're like, oh, so sorry, sir. We'll come back later at a better time.
Oh my gosh, you're so right. Atos deserves that. He deserves to get walked in on in a
for sure.
In a moment of
in a compromising position. Yeah. Absolutely, he does.
So anyways, they head down toward a private room, and I like that Violet takes a moment to talk to Sawyer. But this convo further adds to how Sawyer thinks about everything. Violet says, I know it can be hard to do things differently, especially in an environment that demands perfection and uniformity. And then Sawyer responds, an environment that produces perfection and uniformity. This totally ties into our conversation from the last episode about how riders have basically adapted to become what the dragons select for. Ruthless, cunning, strong, yada yada. And being the perfect soldier for Navarre and rider for the dragon is super important because that has been the expectation. I can only imagine how tough it is for Sawyer because it was so challenging to bond a dragon in the first place. And so he's worried that Sleek won't accept him or think of him the same way if he now has to make adaptations for him.
Oh, Sawyer. To be honest, I'm just so used to Tyrrendor and Darna making adjustments for Violet that I forget the overall environment at Basgiath is not conducive to that. So at first I was like, Sawyer, what's the big deal? Just let Sleek, bend down a little bit. Like if Tyrrendor, what is it, descendant of Flea, I can't even say it.
Fia
Clanfield, and from the Doom Badine line will do it.
Right.
I mean, not to talk shit on Sleek, but that's just really not the overall culture at Basgiath. And I kind of forget that.
Right. And we also don't know the other dragons. We only know Tyrn and Darna as well. But as in Darna says, they roast people at threshing. We'll see them roast people even at presentation for doing the wrong thing. So I did love, though, when Violet leaves the decision of asking Sleek for help up to Sawyer. And then she assures him, you can never disappoint her, referring to Rhi. That was just another layer I honestly wasn't expecting. I really hadn't thought about his desire to also make Rhi and the squad proud. Ultimately, Sawyer just doesn't want to let anyone down, which is really sweet. Eventually, they make it to said room, and it's time for Violet to come clean when she finally admits to Rhi, Sawyer, and Zehyllna that Xaden is slowly turning venin. Which I was like, girl, he is venin, but...
Yes! I noticed that too. I'm like, I see what you're going for, but the moment you channel, you are a venin. It's just a matter of what kind of venin you are.
How venin, to what
How
degree.
Venin, exactly. Honestly, I feel that this is just really reflective of how in denial Violet is. And realistically, she wants to minimize how bad it really is with the squad. So she's just like,
right.
Well, he's not full venin. He's just turning venin. Yeah, no, it's not the same. Okay, Violet. Yeah. Okay.
Everybody knows, though, Rhi in later chapters is definitely suspicious of Xaden. She's like, do we need to be worried about him?
She's always narrowing her eyes at him. You know what? I'm glad someone's using some damn logic in that place because it ain't Violet.
Yes. But anyways, that ends chapter 44. Moving on to chapter 45. The excerpt. This was recovered correspondence from Violet to Duke Xaden. And man, was it a tearjerker. Violet mentions that she started falling for Xaden the night she watched his meeting with the marked ones while she was in the tree gathering plants for her individual challenges in Fourth Wing. In particular, I loved when she says, the truth is you're kinder than you want people to know, maybe kinder than you know. And it's so true. Xaden is really just a little softy deep down. And Violet's reminder of who Xaden is seems to definitely be a crucial part in helping him remember and control his own veninness. He may serve some tough love to everybody else, but he still loves the people he cares for very deeply. I also feel like this was probably one of the letters that Violet decides to write in this set of chapters to get Xaden out of his broody slump.
Oh, chef's kiss on that analysis. The only thing I'll add is I love that even this tiny excerpt shows how well Violet knows Xaden. She says, you'll give some self-serving excuse, which is just so Xaden. And as I'm saying it, I'm mad at Rebecca Yarros. She needs to fix this whole Xaden is a venin thing immediately and leave Violet and Xaden's love alone. Okay, just let them have this.
All right, guys, it is time for another nightmare. And this time, I think we've had some revelations about them.
Ooh, baby, I think we came to the same conclusion.
So prior to this, I genuinely just believed that these were Violet's nightmares. And of course, we noticed, some parallels with some sage, quote unquote, venin in different colored robes showing up in both Violet and Xaden's dreams. But now I actually think this was Xaden's dream, and somehow Violet was experiencing this nightmare as well. And to be honest, maybe many of these nightmares have actually been Xaden's, and Violet has just been experiencing them as well. And I'm thinking about the ones that we read about in Iron Flame and everything too.
Oh yeah, I thought the exact same thing. Some of the details in this one are obviously a bit more heavy-handed. That really bolsters the idea that it's Xaden's nightmare. But there are even small details that once you break them down, you realize the dream just screams Xaden and not Violet.
Yes.
Or both, whatever, but mostly Xaden.
So let's break down the details. We have the quote-unquote sage venin, who in Xaden's POV and Iron Flame, we learn is actually a general ordering him to quit fighting me, and the person in this dream thinks you're dead. This isn't real. Xaden believed that he killed the sage, who is actually a maven, after he turned venin to save Violet and Basgiath. But remember that the venin, in response to Xaden saying generals die the same as soldiers, had said, do they? So we don't know for sure if that venin actually died. And to be honest, I'm willing to bet that he probably didn't. And in fact, I actually wonder if this venin in the dream is Berwin.
Excuse me, Lorraine. I think you actually meant Birkenstock Berwin. We don't want to confuse the listeners, okay? There can only be one.
Berwin.
Yeah. If/when we meet him, he's probably like a really big, bad, scary venin. But I've neutralized him in my mind as just like some dirty hippie wearing Birkenstocks that I kind of forgot that he's probably actually like really fucking dangerous. But oh well.
Yeah.
Oh well.
He ain't cute. He is real fucking scary.
He ain't cute. That's right. Okay. But back to the point. I remember at the end of Iron Flame, I was like, there is no fucking way that venin is dead. If there ain't no body, then he ain't dead. Because I even remember Xaden's like, his body's probably down somewhere in the river. And I was like, yeah, 1,000,000% he ain't dead. So to play devil's advocate, I also thought it could be Berwin. But we've only met 2 named venin in leadership, Theophanie and Berwin. So that doesn't give us much to choose from. So we're kind of just picking one of those 2. In the current world building, we know that there are 4 ranks of venin: Initiate, Asem, Sage, and Maven, in that order. But I started thinking about it, and I would be willing to bet there's one more level above that, but only one venin has it. What is essentially the king or queen of venin, or the commanding general, quote unquote. The reason I think this is because every group has to have a leader to dictate the direction of the group, unless it's like a triumvirate situation. But I highly doubt that when it comes to the venin, because way back in chapter 11, Theophanie strongly alludes to the fact that they do not get along, and she has a low opinion of Berwin. All that is to say, I think it's highly possible there is, as Lorraine likes to say, a head honcho venin over all the mavens, and then it ranks down from there, and that the head honcho venin was the one Xaden, quote unquote, killed at the Battle of Basgiath. I'm going to give my own names. I think it's Initiate, Asem, Sage, Maven, General, but there's only one General. Very similar to how the ranks work at Basgiath, but just compressed. And so I actually think it's possible that the one that was killed in Iron Flame was like the big bad, because you have to remember, the venin thought they had that in the bag. They thought the wards were down. They thought they were going to go straight to those hatching grounds and drain it. Don't you think the most upper echelon of leadership would be there for that?
Probably. Yeah. As you're saying that, for some reason, it made me think of General Daramore.
Yes.
I still don't know shit about him. And maybe
he's still alive.
Maybe
venin are freaking immortal.
Yeah, exactly. So maybe he is like the top venin, possibly.
Or somebody. Yeah.
Right.
That's where my mind went.
I guess my only counter to that, though, I feel like the situation at the end of Iron Flame would make it a little bit weird that Xaden, well, maybe not, though. I mean, Xaden's really strong as well. So in turning venin, and I guess he didn't technically kill that venin that he was fighting against if it was the head general. He just kind of temporarily
disarmed
batted him aside.
Yeah.
For now. Well, okay, but if this venin, though, that is still talking to Xaden in the nightmare is who we think might be Berwin, then are we thinking that Berwin is the head honcho?
No,
because
I don't
if
think
you're
so.
saying that,
no.
I
think Theophanie and Berwin are of equal rank. I think that they're both mavens.
Okay, but you still think there's a difference between the venin that is in this current dream that we're talking about right now and the venin that Xaden fought against at the end of Iron Flame?
Well, actually, and we'll discuss this a little bit, I think in the dream, it's Theophanie.
Oh, you think it's Theophanie. Interesting.
Yeah. So sorry, let me clarify. At the end of Iron Flame, the general venin that Xaden describes killing, who we unconfirmed is dead, I think that's a head honcho venin. I think that's a separate dude. Okay. So in the dream, for named venin characters, we've got 3 options. We've got head honcho venin, we've got Berwin, we've got Theophanie. Any of those are contenders for the dream. I guess when I say I think it's Theophanie, I think there could be evidence to support any of those. It could be the unnamed head honcho, could be Berwin, but it's described that Violet sees wisps of silver hair blow in the breeze at the edge of her vision. So I'm like, who has silver hair? Theophanie. So I don't know. It could be any of them, to be totally frank.
That's true. I was kind of leaning towards Berwyn right now because we know that there's a difference, but we do know that both Berwyn and Theophanie are trying to get Violet and Xaden. It kind of feels like Berwyn's trying to go after Xaden right now, and Theophanie's kind of trying to get Violet, but they're both individually using the person that they're going after to then also, by extension, get the other.
Yeah.
I don't know if that's making a lot of sense. But yeah, I agree that it could be either of them, but I think at this time I'm leaning towards it being Berwyn in this dream.
Totally fair. I really feel like you could go in any direction with reasonable evidence to support it.
Right. To continue on. So back in chapter 11, when we first meet Theophanie, she says, when the shadow wielder comes to us and you come with him, you will remember that I let you live today and choose me, not Berwyn, as your teacher. We just learned that Theophanie is officially a maven venin, and there's been this implied tension over which venin will get to Xaden and Violet. And then next, there's a lightning strike in the background. And in the dream, it's noted, Indarna screams, bellowing with rage and pain, and my head snaps toward the storm. Blue fire licks up the hillside, reaching for the city walls of Drathis, devouring the fleeing civilians in its path. So first of all, I think Indarna is actually Sigale, but appears as Indarna because Violet is entering into or melding with Xaden's dream as well. Actually, I guess like knowing this and knowing that it kind of feels like we're getting a blend of both of their fears and stuff in here. To your point about Theophanie being in this dream, maybe it is both. Like Violet, her fear is Theophanie, Xaden's fear is Berwyn, but because they're blending the two, it's actually like the venin is in a roundabout way, both Berwyn and
both
Theophanie.
Dreams are happening concurrently. Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, that's possible. I kind of thought that it doesn't seem like Violet gets visual confirmation on any of the dragons. She only hears them. And so I was wondering if she was just mixing up Sigale and Indarna screams. Like she just hears a female dragon scream and assumes it's Indarna, but it could be Sigale if we're going with the idea that it's just Xaden's dream. But either way, yes. Yes.
Yeah. To keep going, I kind of wondered if this dream, as I just mentioned, is maybe like a smashing together of Xaden and Violet's fears, because it feels like it's primarily Xaden's nightmare, but, you know, Violet is kind of weaving her own fears into the experience. So it could be that Drathis, quote unquote, is actually supposed to be Basgiath, but because Violet is in this dream as well, she thinks it's Drathis, since that is Violet's fear, since we just learned in the previous chapter that Mira has been sent out to Drathis and that the venin are getting closer and closer out there. Alternatively, I actually wonder if there's also a little bit of foreshadowing or some precognition going on with this dream as well. Can we expect to see something major happen in Drathis later?
Yes to all of this. I love your point about how it's a manifestation of Violet's fear because Mira is stationed there. That makes a lot of sense to me. I mean, who does Violet love more than or about the same as Xaden? Mira. I mean, those two are, really closely ranked for first place. And also, I think you're right. I think this is absolutely foreshadowing for a likely event and attack on Drathis or something in the proximity of that.
So after this, the sage, quote unquote, venin in the dream says, such emotion, don't worry, it will fade in time. Just submit. Come to me. So this is another comment that makes me think that the quote unquote sage venin is still alive because Xaden, as we know in the current timeline, is now venin and has been quite literally struggling with this emotional component of turning venin. Xaden and Violet talked about this back in Hedotus and how Xaden feels it sometimes would be nice to just succumb to the veninness so that he wouldn't have to deal with all of his painful emotions. How would the venin in this dream know this unless he is still alive and is quite literally beckoning to Xaden through this nightmare that Violet is also now privy to?
Every point in this section makes me nauseous. It makes me want to throw up. Absolutely. I also have to point out Xaden or Violet, whoever responds to the sage, fuck you. That response is very Xaden coded to me. Of course, all of our characters use profanity, but the really hard edge fuck you response is usually something Xaden would say, and it says often in this series. It just stood out to me as a tiny piece of evidence that supports the idea that it seems likely this is actually Xaden's dream.
Now, most damning of all was when the venin draws a sword with emeralds adorning the top of the hilt. And then the sword of Tyrrendor rushes toward, it says, my chest, just as in the dream, Violet, or whoever it is, screams, wake. And so obviously, I mean, the fact that the sword of Tyrrendor is in this dream is another clue that, I mean, it just has to be Xaden's nightmare as well, that Violet was also seeing.
Yeah, as I mentioned earlier, this is extremely heavy-handed. It makes absolute zero sense that Violet would have the sword. I'm kind of torn on whether it's a blend or Xaden's dream exclusively. I think I'm leaning a little bit, it's just Xaden's dream, especially because we know this sword is significant not just to Erasha, but to Xaden as well. Remember, at the beginning of the book, when he gets it back, he's very emotional about it. He talks to Violet about how he's not worthy to have it and his father would be so disappointed in him. And so that really makes me lean towards the idea that it's just exclusively Xaden's dream.
So anyways, now that we've covered all the details of this nightmare, if we are going with this idea that it's probably Xaden's dream, then we have to obviously think about how this is possible. So first and foremost, it could be the bond that they share. Perhaps the bond is growing stronger, and with that comes new abilities to enter further into each other's minds. And this was easier because they were both sleeping, so their shields are down, so to speak. The other option, though, heavy eyebrow raise, could this actually be Violet's second signet? I don't know if this is considered to be like within the intrinsic realm or if it's only exclusive to dreams, but I think this feels pretty unusual to just be Violet's nightmare. So at this point, it has to be Xaden's nightmare. Violet has entered into this through some kind of magic.
My simple answer to that is yes. To either of those, all of that. I agree. The only logical conclusion is magic. That's not something I thought I'd ever say.
It's
but
magic.
It's magic. Yeah, I agree. It has to be magic. Unless we're introducing another new kind of magic, I'm pretty sure that this would have to do with Violet's second signet. As we're about to discuss, this puts into perspective another dream that was discussed at the beginning of the book.
Yeah. So speaking of said dream, this reframes the nightmare from chapter 9. And in that particular nightmare, Cat was in that. And we definitely felt that was super odd. But in that dream, there were the blue flames. There was this weird meshing you see between things that Cat fears and things that Violet fears that definitely paralleled the experience we just had in this nightmare that we're reading about with Xaden.
And I have to point out, what was everyone doing in that chapter? They were all sleeping. And so I don't think we can overlook that coincidence either.
In addition to that, what if the nightmare from chapter 9 is also foreshadowing that something could be happening in Gordon as well? Back in chapter 44, Professor Keandra mentioned Gordon and Dazen as potential cities that the venin will target next. So will we also see something happening there? And if that's the case, that would also tie into like a literal manifestation of the ruby necklace Cat got in Zehyllna and how we discussed that it could be related to, you know, royalty in some capacity, aka what if Cat becomes queen because some bad shit goes down there?
Okay, I'm not freaking out. You're freaking out.
Exactly. I don't know. Too many different options, but some kind of magic, Violet seeing other people's dreams. Shit's weird, okay?
And a lot of implications to that, whatever is going on in this moment.
To move on, Violet wakes up, and I would like to note that it says Tyrrendor and Navarre are asleep, but there's a stirring along the bond I share with Xaden. His shields are down, but the foggy barrier of sleep still stands between us. Shields are down, aka easier to enter into someone's minds and nightmares?
Absolutely.
Violet also wonders how long it will be until Theophanie goes after Xaden or her friends, and then begins to wonder how she could possibly face off against a dark wielder who's had decades to perfect a signet. I still need a conduit to control.
Oh, I'll tell you how long it'll be. I'm going to guess in about the next 100 pages, so we don't need to wait much longer.
I don't have any thoughts about this, but it is
just
pretty
vibes.
clear. We are going to meet Theophanie again. As a side note, when I went back and reread chapter 9, Theophanie tells Violet that the thing that she can offer that Violet wants the most is control and knowledge, which does continue to kind of put a damper on the idea of there being a cure. Basically, fuck. But on a cuter and more lighthearted note, it was adorable to learn that the mysterious package Yersinia gave Violet was actually from Xaden, and it contains a black Deborelli silk nightgown and robe. Violet decides that it's time for some old-fashioned pen and paper letter writing.
So time for a quick side quest. Here's a life tip from Addison. I don't want to brag, and that's a lie. I actually do because I am an excellent gift giver. I know that gift giving can be really hard for people. So take notes here on what Xaden does. When they are out together, he notices her eyeing the fabric. Xaden noted that and made something happen with it. Very thoughtful and unexpected. That is the best combination when gift giving. When you're with someone and you want to get a gift for them, even if it's months in advance, whether it's a significant other or a friend or family member, take notes of the things they linger on. I actually keep a running list of gift ideas for people in my life, and that has been invaluable to me. I take notes on items they mention or linger on, or even things that they like. Like I have a cousin who's like, I actually hate flowers. I only like brownies. I don't like cookies or whatever. Take notes on it because trust me, this will revolutionize the way you gift give because gift giving is hard. And so I was proud of Xaden because, you know, he did a good job. And also like extra points because it's like a boyfriend thing. And like when your boyfriend does it, you're like, you noticed. And I love that. Also a little bit, I feel like Xaden selfishly did that for himself. Which we see he benefited from later.
True. Point being, yes, excellent advice. Very thoughtful, very mindful.
Very demure.
Very romantic.
Not demure.
Yeah.
Very sexy.
So anyways, later on at the flight field, the squad learns a dangerous but exciting new skill that Kaori calls a battle mount to help them prepare to fight against the venin and spend as little time on the ground as possible. I thought it was funny when Violet tells Taryn, kind of wish you were a griffin so we could have sat this one out. And then Taryn replies, kind of wish I'd sat out threshing 2 years ago. And I was like, roasted Violet.
I'm not gonna lie, that was probably one of my favorite comebacks in the entire book. Honestly, like
so sassy with it.
And that's the thing is like usually we get curmudgeonly Taryn, but I like sassy Taryn. I when he's like
that he is equally sassy.
Yeah.
For as much as he's a curmudgeon, he's also a sassy queen. So it's also noted that Xaden is there, and Violet thinks, I can't help but notice the dark circles under his eyes. He might be sleeping at night, but it's not well. I'm just noting this to add as some further evidence for the nightmare theory that we discussed just a little bit ago. Bodhi goes on to demonstrate the maneuver first, offering a perfect example of the running landing, an exciting sword slice into the projection, followed by a running leap onto Kira's claw before he climbs back up his dragon and into his seat. I 100% can see why Violet, right after that, thinks, oh, we're fucked. Because, like, you will never catch me doing shit like that. I would 100% miss any jump attempt at my dragon's leg because my vertical jump is like maybe 6 inches. And so I would have to rely on the scarecrow where I just hold out my arms and like
your dragon
hope
lifts
that my
you.
Dragon, hope that my dragon is nice enough to grab me in its claws and will just like fly off like that.
You want me to run, jump, and fight all in the same fluid motion? Absolutely not. I'll do one of those things at a time, maybe. Maybe.
Aside from that, I did find it notable that Violet thinks, sometimes I forget just how nearly perfect Bodhi is at everything. No one thought of him during Battle Brief yesterday. He should have been the first name that came to mind. Countering signets might not be the best offensive tool, but damn if it isn't a hell of a defense. And that is so true. Basically, if Bodhi develops his signet enough, how could anyone get to him? And theoretically, can he counter signets on behalf of everybody else too? You know, that sounds kind of like no shit, but truly, I was like, wait, the potential is like massive.
No, honestly, we talk about this a lot in this episode. We don't know anything about Bodhi. He's never in this book. He's just kind of there in the background. And so we don't know what the limitations of Bodhi's signet are. Also, further evidence to support something like that may be possible. We know that a lot of the marked ones have extra powerful signets or second signets because of their relic. So we don't think Bodhi has a second signet, but it's possible that his signet is even more powerful than the average person. I also specifically wonder if his signet can counteract venin signets. We really don't know much about venin and how their signets work. So I don't know if they operate in a different way or they're exactly the same. But if Bodhi can counter their signets, that has unparalleled value. Like, that cannot be understated. And the fact that literally everyone forgot, like, oh yeah, Bodhi, yeah, he can do really cool shit. Anyway, moving on. You're like, no, this is extremely valuable. Why are we not thinking about this all the time?
In addition to this being a little bit odd, we really, don't hear much about Bodhi. And this thought from Violet, and then, also back in the chapter before they leave for Unbriel, we get that snippet from Bodhi seeming disappointed that he doesn't have a second signet. And he was hoping that if he did have one, maybe that would mean he would get to join the quest squad. And it kind of feels like we're being set up to think that Bodhi is undervalued and overlooked. And I wonder what that means plot-wise for him. Everything that we learn about him presents him in this light of he's always overlooked,
Yeah. I've wondered about that. Honestly, the same is true for Garrick and a little bit Imogen. Sometimes I have to remind myself that this book is only from Violet's POV. So if characters aren't in her immediate circle, we really have no idea what they're up to or what their significance to the overall story is. The reality is Bodhi has little to no reason to interact with Violet on a day-to-day basis. So I think that's a big part of why we just don't get a lot of page time with him. We get more with Garrick this go around because he's on the quest squad. But even still, what we really get about Garrick independently is very limited.
You kind of also combine that with Violet joking, maybe I fell for the wrong, and then she gets cut off, and Xaden responds, it would be a shame to kill my last living relative. I was a little bit like side-eyeing that. I mean, it was a joke, but I'm also kind of like, is this like a little bit of foreshadowing for something? I don't know.
No, I took it as a joke. But I guess as I'm saying it, only if Xaden is saying that. But if Vaden says that, look out, Bodhi. You're not long for this world.
For real. Anyways, all of the squads of the section begin taking turns trying out the maneuver. And I thought it was cool that Violet has made herself a new saddle strap that allows her to maneuver around better. Unfortunately, Indarna is still feeling down, and rather than watch, she flies off with Taryn stating she's adjusting. First squad finishes and retakes the lead for second squad, and I loved her joking comment when she says, I will bring honor to the patch, before she takes off and executes a flawless example of the new maneuver.
Of course she did. Rhiannon is perfection. I love her. That's all I wanted to say. I love her.
Same. Yes. Riddick completes his turn with his usual flair, and then Violet steps up next, ready to execute the altered version of the maneuver as planned with Tarn. I really liked reading that scene. I thought it was really cool, and I just love that Violet and Tarn are in a flow now with how they alter and change their strategies. They just have this innate trust in one another, and that really makes them a great pair as rider and dragon. Overall, this is just another scene that is going to be very cool to see played out on TV.
Oh, absolutely. I love how Taryn and Violet's relationship, and as you said, trust in one another has grown. And that's exactly what Violet thinks in this moment. She thinks, it's just like first year, except we mean to do it. I rise as he falls, and it's all I can do not to look down. That way lies death. This is all about trust. And I was like, yeah, it really is. I mean, when you think about what Violet is letting Taryn do, bro, that is some for real trust. He's literally tossing her in the air.
He's just like, bye, catch you later.
I also loved after our brilliant fucking woman pulls off this insane maneuver, she lands and Kaori is like, that was unorthodox. It is canon that Professor Kaori is Professor Flitwick from Harry Potter. So he's this tiny mustache man who just has a jovial, good nature and it just really likes learning and knowledge. And so anytime Kaori is in the scene, that's what I picture. And it makes me enjoy Kaori's scenes so much more.
So second squad's first years go next. I was a little sad to see that Sloane still hasn't come around to training her signet more, even though she's clearly, so capable as a writer. But I would also like to ask, did you also find what Auric did a little bit odd? It says, instead of rushing the target, he whirls towards Xaden and Kaori and hurls a palm-sized axe. He had a target, just like everyone else, and yet he throws a little weapon straight toward Xaden and Kaori. Honestly, I was wondering if Eric may actually know about Xaden, and that was a little warning to him that he's like, hey, I know what you are. Plus, I do have some more thoughts a little bit later about potential evidence for Aric's signet, but it was weird.
Oh, I thought it was so weird. And I also thought it was weird that Carrie wasn't like, hey, pal, what the fuck? Don't throw a fucking axe at me because I'm your professor.
That's true.
Like,
yes.
who do you think you are? And everyone just accepted this and was like, ooh, that's so cool. Arik wins. Like, what? Huh? Yeah, I thought that was really weird. And then remember a few episodes back, there was a conversation between Arik and Violet that made me feel like something was up. And I think this is just further evidence to support that something's up with Arik for sure. If he doesn't know about Xaden, I think he suspects.
Yes.
I really do.
I think so too. The class ends and Violet and Xaden hang back to have a chat. Violet hands Xaden a present and a letter because it is actually Xaden's birthday. We know it's the last day of March, so presumably Xaden's birthday is March 31st.
Fun fact about this podcast, when Lorraine and I were getting everything set up, various social media accounts, RSS feeds and all that, we had to pick a birthday for our profile, and we picked March 31st to match Xaden Ryerson's birthday.
Oh,
I know!
So I love the gift Violet gives him. It's an onyx wrist cuff with a piece of turret from Ryerson House, and she tells him, that's the vision I'm going to cling to. You and me holding hands looking over the city. And I was like, what a sentimental gift. I love it. And it wasn't even for me.
I did think it was funny when Violet thinks, I hope I made the right choice since it's definitely too soon to bring out anything that resembles a cake. And I was like, yeah, buddy. After Hedonis, not sure I'd ever eat cake again. Well, that's a lie. I would, but it would at least be a little while before I fell up to it. You know?
Yes. So Xaden is still brooding, but we learned that it's been 47 days since he channeled from the Alloy and Deverelli. If we're taking what Xaden says as truth, then thinking about our conversation last episode about the Irids and why we think Xaden's eyes got that bended ring, I think that this means that it was something with the Irid's magic that caused it rather than him channeling, right?
I guess it has to do something with the Irid's magic because his eyes definitely flash red and it didn't really seem like he channeled. And I do believe that Xaden is telling the truth here. So I guess, I don't know, it's still a weird, unresolved issue in my mind.
Per usual, though, we do get a fun little emotional whiplash from Rebecca, because she loves to do that, when Xaden tells Violet, control is probably just prolonging the inevitable. Boo! No!
Xaden, no!
To further the bad news vibes, Felix arrives from Erasia to train Violet because the wards in Erasia are failing, and Wyvern have infiltrated through the wards on more than one occasion now. Specifically, 2 Wyvern made an hour's flight past the wards, and Felix doesn't even think that they have a month. And I was like, yeah. Something is about to go down in that area. I am feeling more and more convinced that there is going to be a big battle happen at Drathis because that is where Mira and Drake were sent. And also it's the closest border outpost to Erasia. And we see literally in the next chapter, the venin are closing in.
It does seem like things seem to be lining up that way, especially because at the end of the chapter, we are in Erasia. They're supposed to be there for a month. And honestly, we're getting close to the end of the book. So I have a feeling that the book will actually end with them still being in Erasia. I think the last 100 plus pages unfold in the month or so that they're there, or even less time.
Yikes. So anyways, that ends chapter 45. Moving on to chapter 46. The excerpt. This was another letter from Violet to Xaden. She was feeling spicy in this one, but she suggests when all the conflict is over that they take leave and hang out in Erasia to, quote, figure out what life is supposed to look like without the daily threat of death. She ends the letter with, you do some of your best work on that throne. And I was like, ooh, damn, Violet. Doing some work with those words there. But thank you for that reminder to go reread the throne room scene in Iron Flame.
I loved 2 things about this excerpt. The first is that it was easy. I did not have to use my brain at all to understand this and how it fits into the story. It was just a nice, straightforward excerpt that required little to no analysis. The second is I love how it goes from sweet, and I was like, aww, to spicy, and I was like, oh, hell yeah. I will take literally any reason to reread My House, My Chair, My Woman. So Thank you, Rebecca
Always.
Yarros, for that.
Yes. We fast forward about 3 weeks, so likely somewhere in the last week of April, and Violet is still training her body to the ground between signet sparring, working out with Imogen, or training with Felix. Apparently, Venin are making progress toward Drathis, and Violet notes at this rate they'll reach the city walls in a matter of weeks, or they could change tactics and simply fly directly for the city. This is definitely bad. That is all. Something big is going to go down there.
Yep. It's mentioned a lot. Definitely feels like some pretty heavy-handed foreshadowing, if nothing else.
Things are getting worse because Xaden was called back to Tyrrendor 10 days prior, leaving Taryn impossible to be around, while Indarna simply isn't around. I started thinking a little bit about the implications of that for Taryn and Zehyllna's bond, because this is definitely a stretch for dragons. I think the longest they were apart was like 7 days, right? When Xaden was stationed at Samara in Iron Flame.
Mhm.
And 10 days is really pushing it. And I wonder how they are faring through all of this. But the fact that they are pushing the limit does seem to show that they can go for longer than we previously thought.
So glad that you brought this up. This is such a minor thing, but it kind of irks me. In Fourth Wing, it was like, Taryn and Zehyllna cannot under any circumstance be parted for more than 3 days. That's
Right.
absolute max, no question. And that was the justification for Xaden and Violet always being in close proximity, right? When he shows up at Montserrat and he's like, Zehyllna refused. Go talk to her about it. And you're like, okay, this tracks, right? And then in Iron Flame, it gets stretched because of Varish. And I was like, okay, that's abnormal. And it's described how miserable they are, and I can roll with it. But I feel like every book, the time they can actually function apart gets longer. It's just starting to feel like inconsistent world building because it was such a huge issue and point of discussion in Fourth Wing. Remember that whole conversation between Violet and Mira and Montserrat when she was worried Violet would have to sacrifice her education because she's like, how's this going to work when he graduates? And now it's like, man, 10 days. Taryn's grumpy. Oh, well, what's new? And I find that a little frustrating. It feels like she kind of determined
tweaking the
based
nature
on what's
of
convenient
their bond. Yes.
For the story. And we'll talk about this more in our end of book wrap up. But I feel like there's starting to be these minor inconsistencies with world building. And I think it's starting to affect my reading experience a little bit.
Yeah, I can kind of agree with that. And just some of the ways that things get explained, or I don't know, we're heading towards resolving some of these big issues in ways that seem too convenient for what we've learned so far. I mean, the only thing I can think of to explain this situation is that like Taryn and Zehyllna's bond is growing, like their mating bond. And so maybe they can go for longer periods of time. But I was like, also, it hasn't been that long since Iron Flame.
No. And honestly, to me, if it was growing, that would mean it was deeper and it would be even harder for them to be away from each other. Like you could flip the logic the other way. So I don't know.
Right.
It's not that big of a deal. It's just kind of like, okay.
Right. Anyways, the squad walks in through the main part of campus and they discuss a variety of things. I thought it was notable that Violet thinks there's a growing resentment between the Eurasian riders and Navarrians over the debate of whether or not to open their borders. And this whole place feels like a bow with its string pulled tight. I think you brought this up last episode, Addison, but it's clear we are seeing sort of a repeat of what happened in Iron Flame and the beginning of Onyx Storm, with this difference between the riders who left to go to Eurasia and the ones who stayed. I do wonder if there's going to be another separation, or is this some sort of early foreshadowing that perhaps Tyrrendor, I don't know, will pull out of the kingdom, become independent, and then some of the riders will head back there. I don't know. It's definitely not good that there's some tension and division over what to do. Or maybe alternatively, if we do get like a big battle in Eurasia, will the Navarrian riders come that way, or will it be sort of the situation with just Eurasian riders,
Yeah, I agree with a lot of those points. And something else that points to this idea is when Kaori gets to Eurasia, he tells Violet, selfishly, I also wanted to see how this Empyrean functions. And that to me pretty heavily implies the Empyrean has effectively split into two groups, and they now operate as their own independent entities. Eurasian riders and Navarrian riders.
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Yeah. We learn that the squad is set to leave for their training rotation in Eurasia the next morning. Sawyer is still undecided about whether he will go. For now. But they hear shouts from the Great Hall, and you bet my eyebrows raise suspiciously at this next event. It says, Auric tilts his head and then pauses just before the door, bringing the squad to an awkward stop. "What are you do?" gets cut off. Auric throws his arm across Lynx's chest and drags him back just before the door bursts open. I know when you read this, it's assumed, oh, he probably just heard people, coming from behind the door and he has quick reflexes. But I don't think so. I am taking this as some possible evidence that maybe Auric's signet is precognition, as we've briefly speculated before. And I actually do think Auric has manifested his signet and just chooses not to reveal it yet. We know he has no qualms about keeping things secret until it's necessary to reveal something. There are many things that Auric has done. Joining the quest squad, speaking multiple languages flawlessly, that you could explain by something seemingly innocuous, but in reality, perhaps he decided to make those decisions because he foresaw a need for his particular skills or knew that some variable needed to change to alter the outcome of an event.
Ooh, okay. I love this. It's so tricky because you're absolutely right. When I think about all the things Auric has done, there are reasonable and logical explanations to explain them. But on the other hand, precognition would explain a lot. I have a lot of potential evidence to support this, but I think I'm going to wait until we get confirmation, or if we don't get it in this book, then I'll save it for our theories episode because I don't want to go down the rabbit hole for it to be like, oh, our signet is ice wielding. And I'll be like, right. Okay. I don't think that's the case. And I do think we'll get it confirmed in this book because we're running into the logical timeline of where, like, if he doesn't manifest or it's not revealed that he has, then he can implode. So they're going to need to address that, I feel like.
So next, the Duke of Chaldeer and Llewellyn burst through the door and they loudly argue over Navarre's decision to not take civilians. And then right after that, Xaden comes out as well, and it states his gaze jumps to mine like a compass pulled north. And I was like, oh, that freaking compass. At this point, I was like, all right, 100%, that thing is not broken. It just has a different purpose. There's some weird magic or fate or whatever at play here that will help Violet and Xaden find each other if they ever, quote unquote, get lost. It just has to be.
Oh, I zeroed in on that so hard. As soon as I read the word compass, I started furiously typing. I was like, oh my God. We absolutely cannot ignore how this is worked in. Xaden walks into a room full of people and his gaze is immediately pulled towards Violet like a compass pulled north. I think that Violet's broken compass will pull her, to use the same language, towards Xaden or possibly a cure, which would also be technically for Xaden. I mean, if that compass doesn't come back up again, I'm a riot. I'm going to start a revolution. Okay.
Well, if everybody's gifts don't come up in some way.
Yes.
I was like, all those dangs and all gifts, yes, they're going to come back up. I just know it.
Also, where's Broccoli? What's he doing? I miss him. Just a baby.
He's out in the field with Drake,
No, it's dangerous out there.
He's got a little flight goggles on. He's strapped in.
Stop. That is so cute. That is so cute.
I know. But anyways, just as an additional note, Violet does notice that the amber in Xaden's eyes seem brighter, but not lighter. So I'm not exactly sure what that means, but we're just going to note it for now. Next, the Duke of Chaldeer and now Halden begin to argue against Xaden and Llewellyn over Xaden's decision to open Tyrrendor's borders and take civilians. I did find it kind of hilarious that Rhee's like getting a little nervous, but Riddick and Sawyer are like taking bets in the background. Then Riddick jokingly says, ooh, he used the wing leader voice.
Yeah. One person of those three is responsible. I'll let you guess which one.
I ultimately did love when Xaden tells Halden, we will take any and all Poromiel civilians willing to climb the Madaro Pass. Would you truly condemn 30,000 people to die? Crazy. Duke Zaddy is just so compassionate, and we love him for that.
Oh yeah, compassionate and hot. What a winning combination.
But honestly, I really cannot believe, well, that's not true. I can believe that Halden had the audacity to then threaten to bring troops into Tyrrendor. Like, this not only pisses Baden off, but it's just so petty because it's clearly about authority and ego. And honestly, it would be a tremendous waste of troops and resources to go after Tyrrendor for taking civilians. Tyrrendor is obviously doing the right thing. I understand that Navarre as a kingdom is worried about resources, but it's a waste of resources to go attack one of your own provinces at this point, too. So I'm just like, what?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I didn't really take Halden seriously. I took that as a lot of just blustering and trying to use a show of force or a threat of force. But he should have known who he was talking to. They ain't scared of Halden. It just doesn't make sense. As we discussed earlier, it's highly likely a decent portion of the civilians would also be willing to help fight in the war, or at least aid in the war effort, helping produce weapons, uniforms, etc. And so it's like, why not just utilize that? Because it's not Navarre's war, it's everyone's war. You know what I mean? Like, we're literally talking about the fate of the world as we know it. And even though there's obviously tension between Poromish citizens and Navarrian citizens, at the end of the day, a common enemy unites all. And so I feel like they're just not thinking strategically or compassionately.
Once again, Auric proves he is the better prince when he tells Halden, I'm on his side, referring to Xaden, unless Ryerson is going to sign another provincial commitment. I believe I'm under his chain of command now, as are probably a third of your troops. Boom. Roasted, Halden. Yet again. But I was wondering, do you think there might be a chance Tyrrendor would sign another agreement? I'm kind of thinking no at this point, but I figured I would ask. And it seems like we're kind of primed to get what Hedotus predicted, which is an independent Tyrrendor somewhere in the future.
Oh, hell nah. Absolutely not. Xaden would never. Tyrrendor would never. And besides the fact that obviously, like, fuck Navarre a little bit, right? But
yeah,
truly, honestly, I think Xaden really does want to do what's best for the province. And that's not what's best for the province, to be totally frank. Navarre has already proven they're untrustworthy. So I would not be signing over a very valuable asset and leverage in negotiations with Navarre. The only way I could see that working out is Navarre would have to promise something absolutely huge to get Xaden to sign that. It would have to be the equivalent to the Eurasian Accords that they signed at the beginning. Like, if there was another large issue, like, we want the Flyers to be allowed to stay at Basgiath, it would have to be an equivalent to that for them to give up that leverage.
Excellent point. So then the Duke of Chaldeer and Halden leave, and we learn that the latest Wyvern infiltration made it halfway to Erasia, meaning time is running out horrifically sooner than estimated. The squad argues that they can stay in Erasia to help, but then they are interrupted by wisps of shadow that spread from behind Violet in an unfamiliar pattern. And I was absolutely shook to see that Lynx has manifested a shadow-wielding signet.
Oh my god, yeah. So you guys know, obviously, we deep dive these books, and when you're deep diving, you sort of develop this intuition for patterns and being able to pick up on foreshadowing. But when I say I did not see this coming at all, I mean it. I was literally like, what the actual fuck is happening right now? I was like, whoa.
Yeah, absolutely.
Whoa. Like, I didn't know where that chapter was going. And I was like, who's Lynx? No, I'm just kidding. I don't know why this joke is stuck in my head, but I'm like, Lynx and Llewellyn? Who? If your name starts with L, I don't know who you are. I don't know who you are.
Well, Llewellyn is a person-place thing.
Oh my god, right?
Point, so,
no,
well,
later,
maybe not a thing, person-place, I guess.
Later when they were talking about Xaden going to Llewellyn, I was like, what do you mean you're going to go to Llewellyn? And then I was like, oh, that's right. Llewellyn is a place and a person. I was like, oh.
Yep. No, but you're so right. The fact that it was Lynx, somebody I just never thought was going to become a prominent character, just boom, gets the shadow-wielding signet. And now, obviously, he's going to become important in some way. Like, he has to be, right?
Also, I'm just thinking this thought has been sparked in real time, and we'll talk about it a little bit more when we get there about nature likes all things in balance and all the implications of that. Yeah. But I started thinking about signets, and we had this discussion last time with the Irids, and the Irids were like, oh, you gifted them. And I'm like, wait, how do signets work, right? And of course, we don't really know anything about Lynx's character. So I'm like, why Lynx? What was his need, or what about his personality made him manifest shadows? Because shadows makes perfect sense for Xaden. And so,
absolutely,
but then I'm like, if signets don't work the way we thought, maybe, I don't know. It's just interesting to me that it's Lynx of all the characters.
Right. There has to be something about him, potentially, that we have yet to learn, I guess. So While it was very sweet that Xaden immediately gives Link some calming instruction, it was also very concerning when Violet says, I don't understand. You're our generation's shadow wielder. And then Xaden responds mentally, not anymore. Magic knows. He's the balance. First and foremost, something bad is going to happen to Xaden. It's like either he's going to end up leveling up in venomous, maybe Birkenstock Berlin's going to nab him after all.
Fuck.
Yeah, basically.
Fuck.
Don't like that at all.
Well, on the balancing, quick question for you. If nature likes things in balance, and the reason that Lynx has manifested the signet based on what we get here is Xaden is venin, and we need a non-venin person to balance that. What would happen hypothetically if Xaden gets cured and you have two non-cured persons with shadow-wielding signets? Would nature need to balance that and basically intervene to off one of them? Can you have two shadow wielding?
I don't know.
I mean, I would think so, right? Because there are multiple ice wielders, fire wielders,
Yes,
but maybe the rare signets are different from the normal. See, again, it would be super nice if we had some concrete world building, truly how signets work and what they mean.
Yeah, that's a great question. I don't know. But I guess diving a little bit deeper into this whole nature likes things in balance, magic needs to be balanced. This does have huge implications because does this mean every signet with the riders has a venin counterpart? Does it work both ways? Because, Theophanie existed first, and now Violet is essentially her counter. And then we have Xaden with his shadows. Lynx, who is younger than him, has now become his counter, essentially. I mean, maybe this is how a lot of signets are determined. Like, they manifest according to what is needed to balance the good versus evil, power or magic or whatever it is. And now I really want to know what other signets the venin have, especially if there are other really rare or really strong signets among their group as well. Just off the top of my head, I know there's been, so far that we've seen venin with wind, fire signets, Theophanie with her lightning, stormish type stuff. And I think that's all I can think of so far, but I'm sure there's others at this point. So
yeah, I think that's all that we have been exposed to in the story.
Right.
And Theophanie's the only named venin that we know of. So
right.
Since we don't have confirmation, we're not going to go too deep down the rabbit hole, but I'm just going to drop this here as some food for thought. Big if, Arik has precognition, does that mean that Melgren is a venin and Arik is Melgren's balance?
Oh, that's scary.
Yeah, shit, right? I am really excited by the balance conversation. I just feel like I need to finish the book. Like, I feel like this is going to be something that we're going to get really deep into for our theories episode. So I don't want to go too crazy right now because this concept has just now been introduced to us and I want to sit with that for a little bit. But I'm like, the implications of this potentially are vast and not good usually.
So things are getting very real politically speaking because Xaden has been asked to resign his professorship. Xaden agreed because he's needed in Llewellyn, the place. This little line piqued my interest. It says, Melgren's demanded we double our Palladium output for alloy, which is straining the miners, and there's unrest after that conscription announcement. There's more to Tyrrendor than just Eratia. And I was like, oh my God, yet another very subtle way to reveal some really important information. So this, the Palladium, is probably why Tyrrendor is so critical to Navarre in addition to everything else, including the soldiers for conscription, the Eurasian wardstone, the dragon hatching grounds. They use Palladium in alloy weapons and potentially other things as well. We don't know for sure if they're in the wardstone, but it kind of stands to reason that they might be, or that it could have been involved in the creation of it. And thus, it is a super important resource to keep Navarre as a whole defended. This is probably also potentially why Hedotus knew and why they predicted Tyrrendor could regain its sovereignty again. Tyrrendor, at this point, truly has basically everything that they need to defend themselves independently if they really wanted to. And I was like, oh, mind blown.
Holy shit. When you spell it out like that, it just all makes perfect sense. Like, I feel like the light bulbs are like, ding, 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 ding. I'm like, oh, I don't know. Yeah. Wow.
Subtle reveals. I'm getting tired of these. Like, I want some big moment to just be like, yeah, it was all this. Can you believe it? And we're all going to be like, wow, whoa.
Yes.
Instead, It's like this little one line that's like Palladium. And I'm like, no.
The exposition.
Like,
we need some exposition. Yes.
That was such an underwhelming way to reveal something that is like so critical, I feel like. Anyways, Violet realizes that Llewellyn is beyond the wards, putting Xaden at further risk, and she begs him to stay, stating, "You have to fight. If you won't do it for yourself, then do it for me. What happens to me? To Tyrrendor and Zehyllna if you give in? Does their bond survive you turning? Does ours? You and I are tethered for life. Am I expected to turn with you? Is that the only way to keep our dragons alive if you give up?" And I was like, okay. Is Violet saying this because of Theophanie? And back in chapter 11, she was like, "I'll let you keep your dragons if you come to me instead of Berwyn." At this point, I was like, I hate all of this. If the venin gets Xaden and Violet, like, what are we gonna do?
We're cooked. We're done for.
So, like, hypothetically, if Xaden turns fully and then controls Zehyllna, what would happen to Tyrrendor and Zehyllna's bond? Would Tyrrendor turn as well? Or, like, would that just, like, kill their bond?
Yeah. So to be honest, I read this part multiple times and I still can't wrap my head around the implications of it all and how it would all work. To be fair, I don't think that Violet, Tyrrendor, Xaden, or Zehyllna really know either. I think it's all very theoretical. But I think it's fair to say it would definitely impact all of their bonds in a negative way. The litmus test is, what is Zehyllna and Xaden's bond like now that Xaden's venin? And it seems like their relationship is strained, but their bond is fine. They're able to communicate. He's able to ride. He's able to wield. So,
True.
But also then you throw in the element of, see, this is such a semantic bullshit annoying thing. He's not a full venin. He's turning venin, which I'm like,
right.
You're a venin if you started channeling from the source. In my opinion, the first time you channel, that means that you are a venin. Because you can only be killed by an alloy dagger or lightning, whatever. But you know what I mean. So I'm like, it's very semantic and confusing. Part of me is like, it wouldn't affect Tyrrendor and Zehyllna's mating bond at all. Not in the sense of like it would break their bond, but it would become a question of like, if Xaden turns full venin and he goes to a sage and Zehyllna goes with him, then Tyrrendor would follow, then Violet would have to follow, or Zehyllna would have to break her bond with Xaden. I don't think it would actually negatively affect Tyrrendor and Zehyllna in the sense of like their mating bond would be damaged. But I don't know. It's hard to say.
Do we know dragons with each other can break their bonds?
Mating bonds? No idea. Never been discussed. We have very limited insight into them. We only know of two bonded pairs.
Right.
We only know of Zehyllna and Tyrrendor, and then
Mazen.
Yes.
Something with the G, I think. Mazen.
I thought it was with the C. But yes, other than that, and we basically know that they can communicate across long distances. And the bond is super deep and special. And remember, as much as we think we know, there's way more that we don't. So
true.
Anyone's guess.
Yeah. Anyways, Xaden gets called for more politics, and before he leaves, he tells Violet the man you love no longer fully belongs to himself. And at this point, Llewellyn speaks to Violet, and I found his advice really poignant and true. He tells her he needs you to keep him from fraying, which can sometimes mean putting what you want or need aside for the good of the province. This is a crucial time that will determine the path of the province for the next millennium. Your purpose is as great as his in a wholly separate arena, and if that purpose makes it impossible for you to be what Tyrrendor needs, and then Violet interrupts to say Tyrrendor, not Xaden, and then Llewellyn continues to say they are now one and the same. Ultimately, this is a really tricky thing. Violet, of course, does not want to hear this because in her mind, as a person with a romantic and deeply personal relationship to Xaden, she wants what's best for the Xaden that she knows, the inner Xaden, the Xaden who is not responsible for an entire province of people. But Llewellyn is kind of giving her a reality check that I think is important. This is an extremely critical time for Tyrrendor and the kingdom, and like it or not, Xaden is the person who bears that responsibility now. Xaden himself, I think, has echoed this sentiment in terms of Violet's role as a leader, thanks to Tyrrendor, whether she wants it or not. And the same is basically true for Xaden. He inherited this role and now has the duty to protect the province at all costs. Xaden has also specifically asked for Violet to help him protect Tyrrendor, and I think this decision to accept that Xaden has provincial responsibilities is something Violet did ultimately sign up for when she agreed to help him protect Tyrrendor.
Wow, that was a lot to process. I'm sorry, what you said is great. I literally wrote chef's kiss on that analysis, but just this whole conversation, it was a lot to parse. It was a lot to think about. I know part of what spurs Xaden into making the choice to resign his professorship is being upset by Link's manifesting, but I support his decision. Realistically, he can't do justice to the people of Tyrrendor and the cadets at Basgiath in teaching them signet sparring. He really can't do both. He's one person with only so many hours in the day. I know Violet takes it as him giving up at the moment, but I really didn't take it that way. I thought Violet's whole spiel about fighting for us was a little bit of an overreaction. He didn't say, I'm out, I'm just going to go channel. He was just like, I think I just need to be away from here. And so I found that a little bit dramatic, to be honest. It was a little dramatic for me.
I agree with that, yeah. I love that Violet loves Xaden so much and is looking at things from the perspective of their needs as individuals, but I do think she's being a little bit overreactive and a little bit selfish. She responds, we're already balanced because we're both strong for ourselves and each other, but not as his expense. And then Llewellyn says, he'll say the same about you. It's what makes your relationship so dangerous. And I think ultimately Llewellyn is well aware that Violet is, as we've clearly seen, the trigger for Xaden. She is now more of an obstacle to ensuring the safety of Tyrrendor in a way, because if it really came down to like a life or death situation with Violet, Xaden would choose her over Tyrrendor immediately.
Immediately. No hesitation.
And this makes Violet forever Xaden's number one consideration in every decision that is made from here on out. And I'm sure there are going to be times when what Violet wants or what she thinks Xaden needs is going to be at odds with what's best for the province and everyone else. The only way for Xaden to be able to make provincial decisions with a clear head is if Violet steps back and lets him do that without interfering. And the same is true for Violet and her role as a leader among the riders now, too. Like if we take the flight exercise last chapter as an example, Xaden was about ready to like step in and save her, but she insisted that he just needed to trust her and let her figure it out. And there are going to be many more moments like that, I'm sure. And to be honest, when an entire continent is at risk of, dying off to evil, life-draining venin, yeah, I would kind of say your personal wants and desires are gonna have to take a little bit of a back burner at times. So,
isn't this the plot of every movie, show, book where it's about a king or a president? How do you balance the needs of your personal, your relationship, your family, and the people you serve, right? That's the burden of leadership. I think a lot of what you're saying is really right. It's something you constantly have to be aware of. It's dynamic. Obviously, the needs of the province, top priority because of the venin. But, in a world of peace and prosperity, sure, let those people take a back seat. And to that point, I also think Violet is going to have to figure out how she fits into the political landscape of Tyrrendor herself. If she and Xaden are forever and always, as they both want, she will have to be involved in politics. And anytime that ever comes up, even in passing, Violet is always really quick to be like, absolutely not. I have no interest in leadership.
Right.
That has to change. And I think it will. I think the conversation that Violet and Xaden have when they're in Zehyllna about she was selected by a general among dragons is indicative of that. But that's going to be character growth that Violet is going to have to experience. And I have a feeling there are going to be some growing pains. And this is planting the seed for that development for the rest of the series. I also just want to point out and keep in perspective that Violet is very young and has experienced a lot of recent trauma that she has not even begun to process. And I think, honestly, her immaturity and lack of world life experience shows in this conversation. I'm not blaming her. I mean, she's been an adult by societal standards for like 3 years. You know what I mean?
Right.
Like, her upbringing has been unconventional. There's a lot going into that. So I don't know. It's going to be painful. It's going to be painful to read and watch them go through, but they're going to have to figure it out. So
I
don't know.
with that.
I also chuckled at this part and did the motherly knowing nod when Violet says, Xaden comes first for me. It comes out so self-sacrificial that I half expect my mother to appear and smack me upside the back of the head.
Yep.
And I was like, girl, yes. And see, that is why I love Rhee, because Rhee is like, bitch, you're the most powerful writer of our generation. And the little Grey's Anatomy reference, throwing it way back when Christina and Meredith and Derek's whole thing. I still remember watching this and Christina was like, he's not the son, you are. And that's what it feels like. For all my Grey's Anatomy fans, you'll know what I'm talking about. And if not, I would tell you to start watching Grey's Anatomy, but I will not put that burden on you because there's like 30 seasons and it will never end. So don't start. It's good, but don't start.
Oh, yeah, I absolutely agree with that. It really does, I think, just come down to a little bit of some maturity. Obviously, we also know
A lot of
we're reading
maturity.
a fantasy romance novel. Like, the romance takes an equal
True.
stage in this book as much as the
That's
fantasy
true.
does.
I know
And
sometimes
so
I like
you can
really go at
expect this
this.
out of them.
Yeah.
I know.
I like really go at it like this is a real world couple and problem. I'm
Right,
like, y'all
right.
need therapy because this is not healthy and you're not working your social emotional toolkit and this ain't gonna, and I'm like, oh God, this is a book.
Yeah, I gotta step back here.
Take a step back. That's right.
So we do know that one of the main reasons that Violet wants Xaden to stay is to keep him in the wards and prevent him from further turning. This is highlighted when she thinks that Xaden isn't in power. He is power. And she's not wrong in that keeping Xaden from turning further is one of the best ways to keep Tyrrendor safe. But I actually do wonder if Llewellyn possibly knows about Xaden. And there's a little bit of double meaning at play when he said he'll say the same about you. It's what makes your relationship so dangerous. Because, what if Xaden decides that the best way to protect Violet is to leave and therefore he abandons Tyrrendor or something like that because that is what he thinks is the best way to keep Violet safe. You know what I mean? Like the veninness thing
It's
is
giving Twilight. It's giving
major
Twilight.
problems. Yeah.
It's given some real Edward Cullen, which I'm just going to prepare y'all. I think for the rest of this book, I'm going to be making references to that. So if you haven't read Twilight, it's your calling card. It's time to go. You just need to get through the second book and you'll know what we're talking about. And if you haven't, you probably should. It's a cultural touch point of our generation. You got to read it.
Yeah.
I have to be honest. I don't think Llewellyn does know. I really don't.
You don't think so?
But no. But honestly, after Brennan popped in and was like, I know everything, I was like, okay, well, I guess more people know than I thought. If there were going to be more people to know that were not explicitly told, Llewellyn would be a good candidate because he's known Xaden. He's helped raise him and he's around him a lot. And so he would probably be privy to more of Xaden's Vaden moments and maybe notice that. As you're saying it, and now I'm thinking about when he first talks to Violet and he says, the man you love is no longer his own or something like that. And I'm kind of like, well, now I'm wondering. I still kind of think, wow, I just did like a pivot in real time. Okay.
It's like the Auric thing where there's like a seemingly innocuous, very logical way to explain what he's saying, but it's literally only because Rebecca and her damn writing style and how she loves to like sneak shit in there, and then on a new read or like with new information presented, you're like, wait, that did not mean what I think it did originally.
I know. When you ask me these questions, I felt like I'm like, no. And then I'm like, yes. And I'm like, you know what? What if Llewellyn's venin too? My brain's just like, let's just go to the absolute extreme because you know what? All bets are off. All bets are off. Okay, it's time for my theory. I have a theory to present based on this conversation. Again, expectation setting, not groundbreaking or earth-shattering, but just interesting. I don't know how old Llewellyn is, but based on context and comments Xaden has made about how Llewellyn helped raise him after Fen died, I'm going to guess that Llewellyn is about the same age as Fen Ryerson would have been or slightly older. Okay? Now, when Llewellyn first overhears Violet and Xaden, he says to Violet, I'm not entirely sure what that was about, but I've seen how hard it can be to love someone in power. This made me wonder, who could he possibly be referring to? Later in the conversation, Violet says, by balance, you mean Tyrrendor comes first, Xaden second, our relationship fights for third, and my personal needs are a matter of convenience. Llewellyn says, basically, yes, something like that. What if Llewellyn is talking about Fen Ryerson and Talia's relationship? What if Talia actually loved Fen all along? Maybe not initially in the beginning because it seems like it was an arranged marriage, but she did fall in love with him. They could never find the balance of all of those things, and she got tired of her personal needs always being in last place, and that is a big part of why she left. We know from the excerpt in chapter 25, Fen Ryerson says the whole marriage is a necessary evil to secure the line, nothing more, save love for your children. That pretty clearly tells you that Fen's top priority was Tyrrendor and then probably Xaden. This is further bolstered when Violet is talking to Talia in Hedotus, and Talia says, he risked Eratia, she whispers through a watery smile, then he loves you too. His father never would have, trails off. She shakes her head, does it matter? all of that kind of led me to believe, like, what if we're getting the narrative totally wrong about Talia? Again, not defending her actions. She shouldn't love Xaden. I still feel strongly about that. But
Yeah.
maybe we don't have the full story about Talia and Fen and what life was like for Talia. And knowing that full story may change things. Like, it may change things for us as readers, but it may change things for Xaden too. Like, if Talia was able to talk to Xaden and explain what life was like for her, about how she was basically completely isolated alone and living without the kind of love that he and Violet have, maybe it would allow Xaden to build some empathy and they could potentially, move forward and repair the relationship. I don't know. It was just interesting to me. It was an interesting
really
thought experiment. I know, because don't get me wrong, again, this is all speculative. But if this is true, it changes a little bit how I feel about Talia. Can you imagine?
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Obviously not super relevant to the overall plot of Xaden being a venin and the impending attack, but I just thought it was interesting.
Oh, I'm really curious. I still want to know, what is Talia's background? Is she a noble? Like, how did she get into this marriage with Xaden? How many sons does she have?
Especially that one. How many children have you given birth to and how many know about it?
No, but I totally agree. Like, I think all the characters have more layers to them, and obviously this book is strictly from mostly Violet's POV, and so we just don't get a chance to know or hear from other characters and their internal thoughts, which we knew that when we started reading this book, but it helps to humanize characters and understand why they made the decisions that they did.
I think Rebecca Yarros said in an interview, and I'd have to track it down, but she doesn't hate any of her characters because she understands what drives them. Like, she may not like all of them and their actions, but I think the only character she said she hated was Varish because he was truly just evil and wanted power. But I think in the interview, even someone was like, well, what about like Jack Barlow and, other kind of unpleasant characters? And she's like, well, I don't love, what he does, but I understand what drives him. I feel like that's true for Talia as well.
Totally agree. On that note, that ends chapter 46. Moving on to chapter 47, the excerpt. This was very short. It is from Article 1, Section 2 of the Dragon Riders Codex, and it simply says, a dragon determines its last flight and its riders. I feel like this plays really well into the context of this chapter, with Sawyer getting back on Sleeg and how Sleeg was willing to make changes to help Sawyer out, just as Taryn has done for Violet. Basically, it's the dragon equivalent of, if he wanted to, he would. On a more ominous note, though, are we going to get a dragon making some sort of like self-sacrifice and in turn killing the rider too? Whether that's because the rider turned venin, or maybe it's a part of a big battle that the dragon and the rider will be like the sacrificial tide turner for or something. I hate to say that, but
someone's got to do it. It's going to be. I like your first point because that made me feel a lot better, because no matter how many times I read this, I always read this as ominous. It always seemed like, read it with a different tone. A dragon determines its last flight and its riders. And like, doesn't that make you think like, oh, because that's how I read it. Okay. I read it. It was bad. Gave bad vibes.
Oh, absolutely. Bright and early the next morning of their scheduled flight to Erasia, Violet meets with Sawyer as he attempts to get back on Sleek. I was giddy with excitement at this because I love that Sawyer didn't give up and he ultimately ends up riding again.
Yay.
Sawyer has crafted himself a little butter knife-esque like hook extension thing. That's how I was picturing it. I don't know.
Okay.
And it's meant to pop out of his boot and help him catch the top of Sleek's scale so that he can then get enough leverage to like climb into his seat. I liked getting some insight into Sawyer's relationship with Sleek, which definitely has a little bit more of a serious, perhaps argumentative tone than Riddick and Atrum.
That's for sure. I really liked it too. I know we talked about this in the last episode. It's nice to see the relationship between our other riders and their dragons. It's nice to see the personality shine through.
So Sawyer's first attempt does not go well. He tries a second attempt with a suggestion from Violet to kick his boot lever open just as his momentum shifts, but unfortunately that doesn't work either. I thought it was absolutely adorable that Indarna creeps a little closer and says, I can flatten the tip of my tail and boost him. And she's like, trying to help. And it's a little bit of a glimmer that she's coming back around because she's obviously been MIA.
I didn't think about it until you said it, but that's like such a huge offer for her to even consider. Because
Yeah.
most dragons, you have to give them a wide berth or they're like, get out of my space. So the fact that another dragon was willing to lift someone onto their dragon, and Darna!
And Darna, you're so cute. I love you. So Sawyer begins to argue with Sleek, and meanwhile, Violet asks Taryn if he feels dishonored making adjustments for her, which, of course, our Grump Sunshine Dragon says, it would take a great deal more than a change of posture to dishonor me. However, Violet continues on to say, but you never had to lower yourself before me, did you? Not for Naolin, or gets cut off. And then Taryn replies, we do not speak of the one who came before, and this is followed by an agonizing pain that floods the bond. I am dying to know what Taryn knows about Naolin. Obviously, he knows what happened for real. And I mean, I do wonder if Naolin turning venin was actually what happened. And it's not just that Naolin died.
Because he ain't dead. Because he's a venin. And I have another piece of evidence to support that in a later conversation in this chapter. I'll wait till we get there. But same. Unfortunately, I don't think we're going to get any information on what happened with Naolin in this book. I was very hopeful when this book came out that we were going to get some insight in conversation with Brennan. Not necessarily that it would be revealed, but we would get something else to bolster this thought other than this. But there is 1,000,000% more to this. I will actually die on this hill. I'll bet the farm on this one. I don't care that there's basically no evidence. It's just a feeling. It's a vibe, but it's strong. The vibe is strong.
Yes,
I'll risk it all for
with
this
that.
one.
Sorry, I was a little stunned because you said, I'll bet the farm. And I'm like,
you never heard that before?
No.
It's like a colloquial. My mom grew up on a farm. Okay, I don't know. I'll bet the farm.
Oh, okay,
I think it's like, I'll bet your bottom dollar. Like, I'll bet the house. You know,
like I mean, betting everything. Yeah. I just hadn't, I understood what you were saying. I just hadn't heard that version before. And I was like,
you should start incorporating it into your daily life. Yeah, I'll bet the farm. The equipment, the animals, I'll bet it all.
So anyways, Sawyer and Sleek continue arguing, and I gotta say my little eyes were watering when Sawyer yells, because my leg was and still is worth your life. Of course you're allowed to feel the same. And then he goes, oh, and then he goes silent. And then it says, Sleek huffs and extends his leg, sliding his claw through the mud slowly. It was to a walkable degree of incline. And I was like,
I want to cry right now.
I know.
See, what I'm talking about. Like, this really caught me off guard.
What a heartfelt, tear-inducing moment. Sawyer was so worried about dishonoring Sleek, but he never regretted losing his leg to save Sleek's life. And this whole time, he was anxious about that and being imperfect. But here Sleek is making adjustments so that his rider can fly again.
Oh, I love this.
Sawyer slowly climbs up into his seat once again. Small moment of celebration.
Woo.
And I loved that Violet says, you can ride. Now, does it matter how you got there or only that he chose you? And Sawyer responds, you know the answer to that already.
Oh my God. Guys, I was literally crying during this part. Like, I was just driving, listening, and I'm like, oh my God. I really caught me off guard emotionally because I just wasn't expecting to. I was expecting to celebrate and be happy. But just the way it's described, and you can just feel Sawyer's joy at being able to be where he feels like he belongs. And the quote when Violet says, now, does it matter how you got there or only that he chose you? I can see this so vividly in my mind. He's like, you know the answer to that already. And that did me in. Okay.
From atop his dragon. And
he's like, I get like the smiling and like looking down and like the joy. And oh my God, it's making me emotional right now.
Oh man, who got you smiling like that? Sleek and Sawyer.
Sleek and Sawyer.
But wait, the tears do not stop. As the rest of the squad arrives, Violet takes time to speak with Darna next. And this was an equally heartfelt, tear-inducing scene. Violet uses Darna's own words and says, you can grieve, and when Darna encounters you do not talk about your grief, neither does he, referring to Taryn. Violet responds, I'm getting there, and he's not perfect. either. I was like almost ready to take back everything we said last episode about, humans not having any control with their dragons and stuff because
Not me.
Damn.
Nah.
Yeah, okay, but like this right here shows that, at least with Andarna, she really respects both Tyrrendor and Violet and takes cues from both of them over how to behave and what's acceptable and what's not. I just love baby Andarna so much. And she's right. Violet has barely taken a single moment to stop and grieve over everything that she's experienced so far. Most importantly, though, I feel like this is a good sign that Andarna is working through the hurt she feels from the Irids and, is coming to terms with that experience slowly but surely.
Yeah. We really forget that Andarna is actually still a literal baby. Like, because she's so giant now, you think she's more of an adolescence. But in reality, she's only been out of the shell for like less than 5 years.
She's
I'm pretty sure
3 years old or something like that.
And so she's just a baby. She's just a baby.
Yeah.
I see what you're saying about, you get a little soft on the Empyrean. Dragons healing their trauma is emotional. Humans healing their trauma is emotional. But dragons and humans healing their trauma together, devastating. I also want to point out here, Andarna calls Tyrrendor out for not talking about his grief. And immediately I'm like, what could Tyrrendor possibly have to grieve over? And I bet you can guess what came to mind. Nail-in. Especially coming off that, what was the phrase? Extreme agony floods the bond.
Yes.
And I just like that's another tiny breadcrumb to add to the collection, Also, we can cut this out. But I just thought of, what if Sloane is Nail-in's balance? Because Nail-in was a siphon and Sloane is a siphon. And what if Sloane popped up because Nail-in's venin? I can't stop thinking about Nail-in.
Yeah, all the balances. Oh my God, no, you're so right. We're keeping this in. We're not taking this out.
Oh, okay.
Why would we take that out?
Well, it didn't really super fit to what we were discussing, but
I don't care.
Okay.
Keep it in.
Keep it in. But I'm just I'm focused on what's happening, but I just keep thinking about Nail-in in the back of my mind. I really want to know.
Oh
I know.
My gosh, no, yeah.
We're going to have to talk
make a lot of sense.
In depth about the balances in our theories episode. I'm excited about that. That's honestly my most exciting theory right now, besides is Garrick Talia's son, not letting that one go.
Oh, man. Wow. So much to think about, honestly. So, to get back on track, Rhee is also relieved to see that Sawyer is ready to ride again, while Riddick gives literally everyone a huge hug in celebration.
I could not stop laughing when Riddick runs up and is like, Sawyer, look at you! And he gets close to Sleek, and Sleek snaps his teeth shut in front of him, and Riddick is like, look at you from a distance. Just like the way he's hugging everybody. And I like the description of everyone's hugs. Like Cat stiffs it. And Dane just pats him on the back. He's like, that's nice, buddy.
Right. I love these moments. Give me more of these. And
cling
less
to
of
these.
the venin are coming. I don't want that. Keep it away from me. But I did think what Violet tells Rhee really summed everything up nicely. She tells her, you're our friend, but you're also our squad leader. He doesn't want to fail in front of you. None of us do. We want to make you proud. You couldn't have made this happen any faster. It was always down to the two of them. It was only ever going to be on their timeline. So this does really speak to how unique and intimate a bond between a rider and a dragon really is. Moments like this make me feel bad for questioning the Empyrean, but truly, not to give a super cliche theme line here, but maybe love does really conquer all.
Oh,
and
my
love
God.
will be the answer.
Do not be fooled by the Empyrean. This is all part of their manipulation tactics. Don't go soft on me. Oh, they do one nice thing for one person, and you're like, no. Toughen up, Lorraine.
I will not. I am forever soft.
I know. It's okay, baby.
But okay, sure enough, I am suspicious though. First I'm sweet and then I'm sour. Okay, reverse Sour Patch here.
I like that.
So I do wonder if there's some double meaning in terms of this applying to Violet and Xaden's relationship as well. More so in the sense that it kind of reads prophetically for the fate of the continent or something coming down to Xaden and Violet or, something ominous like that.
Oh, okay.
Oh, no. But to move on, celebrations are sufficiently conducted and the squad takes off and lands for the night just inside the Tyrrish border. Violet and Tyrrendor are notably both annoyed that Xaden and Sigale are not in Tyrrendor. I thought it was kind of funny when Andarna snaps at Kaori for getting too close. I understand why he's so curious and that he's dying to know more about the Empyrean, but He also should have known better.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
What did he think was going to happen? As the dragon expert, you would think he'd be
Yeah.
like, you can't blame him for trying, though.
Yeah. They eventually arrive at Ryerson House, and everyone disperses to find the rooms and change before they plan to leave to visit Rhee's family. I love that Bodhi sees Violet hesitating about where to go, and he tells her, "We're home, Vi. Act like it. Sleep in your bed. He'll just brood harder if you don't." I am really curious to see what Bodhi's role is going to be moving forward. He's so sweet, and I would like some more page time with him to get to know his character better. Violet heads to the room and has kind of this like surreal frozen in time experience as she finds everything as they had left it back in December. I did find it notable that she thinks the only indication months have passed is the glass box from Zehyllna on his nightstand and the emerald hilted blade of Erasia resting within. It's missing a single stone near the top, but looks no worse for wear after having been in Navarrian possession for 600 years. I don't know why, but something feels significant about the blade being in this box. Is this symbolic of Tyrrendor needing to be protected or something? Also, I would like to know what happened to the stone that's missing. Did someone take it? Why is it missing?
Yes, this immediately caught my attention as well. For those of you who have been listening for a while, you know we are always on Gem Watch. And if you have just tuning into this episode, we have some reels if you don't want to go back and listen to the whole episode. So immediately I was like, okay, there's an emerald missing. So where is that emerald and what is the significance of that? I find it hard to believe an emerald just fell out of a sword that's hundreds of years old and has withstood the test of time. So it feels like it was taken out intentionally, but I can't imagine why. And as you like to say, I'm going to bookmark it.
Yes, it's been flagged. We're on
Noted.
missing Gem Watch now. So
I'm just going to drop this like little crazy thing. We'll talk about it probably in the next episode because I think there's going to be some follow-up to Xaden's dream. But did it fall out in the dream? Is that possible? Like how physical are the things in the dream and that they can be manipulated? Because it feels like pretty realistic. I don't know. Anyway, that was just like a very crazy thought, but
funny
no
because
thoughts, just
I was
vibes.
thinking maybe Navarre's royalty or something took it while it was in their possession or something like that.
But then wouldn't Violet have noted that when she first saw the blade back in Deverelli? It seems like she's noting
that's true.
that it looks different now than when she last saw it. It looks the same except for that stone that's missing.
We'll have to think about that. It's on our watch list, so we will be looking for it. So Brennan interrupts Violet's thoughts, and after pulling him into the room, they have an interesting conversation. First of all, Brennan is not only aware that Xaden is venin, but has been actively working on trying to mend him every day that he's seen him.
This is probably not the most important detail, but I would like to know how and when Brennan found out. I could honestly see Xaden telling him and asking him for help, but I also feel like Brennan is pretty observant, so maybe he figured it out on his own. It was just kind of like, hey, I know what's up. Let me help you. I would like to know, though.
Well, okay, I just had like another little...
what if Brennan's a venin and he sensed him? Is that what you're thinking?
Yeah. He never touched back on Brennan's amber eyes. I don't know.
Oh, man. We got so far down the rabbit hole. How did I know you were going to say that when I saw your face?
Because you were thinking it too.
I did actually think it. I just didn't put it in the notes, but I did think about that.
Notably, Brennan mentions that he must be further along than Jack had been when Nolan started working with him. I guess this means Xaden is still an initiate, but he has to be close to ASIM at this point, right?
Yeah,
like
unclear, but
one more channel or like one more step away.
One more oopsie, you know?
Yeah. We also get a list of a few different things that they've tried, including silent offerings in every local temple, pushing magic back into the earth, and sitting with eggs in the hatching grounds. Brennan states, we've tried everything either of us could think of, though the letter he sent from Llewellyn yesterday had a weird, and then it gets cut off. What do you think he was going to say? I feel like Brennan was going to say Xaden sounded hopeful, despite nothing working yet, but I don't know.
I like that idea. I did notice the cutoff, mostly because anytime anything gets cut off, it pretty much always means some important information was coming. But I did not really have any ideas on what it could mean. So I like your idea. Maybe it's sort of drawing some intrigue and foreshadowing that Xaden might have an idea about how to slow it down or reverse it or building up to that. I don't know.
It could also be the complete opposite way of where he
No.
was going to say Xaden sounded like not very excited. Aside from that, once again, as much as I'm like, ooh, everything's bad, I'm still not ready to give up hope. But obviously, every time it's mentioned, they tried to cure him and it didn't work, or there is no cure, or whatever it is, it just chips away at the possibility.
I like that you still have hope. I don't. You know, I planted it last week. I'm like, there ain't no cure. Ain't no cure. So,
I was just doing a little bit of thinking about this because, you know, if magic likes all things in balance, then how do you reverse or rebalance the death of a piece of your soul in exchange for power? Like,
you don't.
In my brain, it would make sense to go, well, in my brain, I was like, you would go to those who deal with souls, aka the gods.
The gods.
And I have more thoughts about that when we get to chapter 49. But I mean, they're really the only entity that we know of that seems to have any association with the souls, you know? Anyways, to end this chapter, Violet, on the other hand, is quite hopeful because she thinks he might be Rudy, but he hasn't given up.
I'm glad someone hasn't given up.
That makes two of us, but not Addison.
Not Addison. Count me out on that. Listen, I want that, but Rebecca Yar's going to do us dirty. I don't trust her. She's broken my trust.
All right. So that ends chapter 47. Moving on to chapter 48, the excerpt. This was from a work titled The Resurrection of Evil, a timeline by Pearson Hallowell. This particular passage is from 472 AU and took place in what I am assuming is a village called Willhaven in the Poromiel province of Breivik. It describes how the entire village of Willhaven, with the exception of a single house, was desiccated by one venin assumed to be of sage rank. The venin was described by the only adult survivor as looking astonishingly ageless with hair as black as the day we married. But in the place of the age lines were bulging scarlet veins branching outward from her red ringed eyes. I think this is the first-hand account that we've gotten about venin so far. I don't think we've ever gotten like a specific retelling of somebody's encounter with venin yet, right?
I don't think so, no.
Okay, so we know nothing about this woman who turned venin, but I am wondering, is this Theophanie's origin story? I have nothing to support that other than just vibes, but...
Retweet, baby. Retweet. I mean, why else? You have to ask yourself, what is the purpose of this in our story? It's either a character that we know, and that's what it's in reference to, and we're supposed to breadcrumb that together, or it's a character we're going to be introduced to, maybe in the next book, and then we can, retrospectively look back and say, oh, this was about whoever. But absolutely. That's what I thought, honestly.
Okay. We are in agreement. So we probably won't get answers to this, but I would love to know if this was a regular person without magic, or was this a flyer or some royal member who turned venin? And I say flyer because this is in Poromiel. So, I mean, I don't think there would be a writer.
Yeah.
Also, I would like to know what was special about that one house. Was it because this was this person's house and they turned, so they didn't, destroy their own home? Or was there something magical about it that blocked the venin from attacking it? Last but not least, I think this may be from the book Violet is reading in this chapter.
Oh, and remember there's that part where she's like, I checked the pattern, 3. Oh, that's
and once again,
connection.
Another freaking thought that she didn't finish.
Because there's 3 survivors. So maybe she's noting some pattern about that. Oh, okay, that's interesting. Because I had nothing on that. We'll talk about it later, but I had nothing.
So Violet reads the latest book to Kara's Ascent with some hope that maybe they will be able to help Xaden, since there's never been a problem Brennan couldn't solve. I did find it notable that Violet and the squad have been working on a new delayed activation rune with Trissa. The purpose of this rune is to take an existing dormant rune and turn it on by tempering more magic into it. So this is obviously very interesting. I mean, the implications of it would make it super useful because this makes it so that you can use runes at a later time and they don't need to be immediately activated and used. So then, of course, I'm wondering, were these some of the runes that the squad took with them to the Isles? I wonder if this also means we're going to encounter an object or a rune that has this delayed activation property. Mostly I just want to know what they would use a rune like this for. As a follow-up question, how many times can you retemper magic into a rune like this? Is it just as many times as you want, or is that something else that is like set by other things, other shapes or whatever it is that you do with the rune?
Do the materials have limitations, whatever? Yeah.
I don't know. Aside from that, unfortunately, Violet has not mastered this, so we are not privy to any more information on this rune or any other ones, per usual. So at this point, I really am starting to wonder if there's something specific about Violet or her power that is like preventing her from being able to learn runes. I just find it really weird that literally everybody else, including first years with less experience than her, are able to master this rune, and yet Violet can't even get it to work in the slightest. And I'm like, girl, you are like the most powerful person. And she's like, well, you can't be good at everything. But I'm like, something is up. Something is weird. At this point, I'm like, how have you not like mastered a single one yet?
You know, I never thought about it until you said that, but you're absolutely right. Violet doesn't just seem to, quote unquote, struggle with runes. It actually kind of seems like she literally cannot do them. To her point, even the first years could do it. And she's like, I literally couldn't do it at all. And I'm like,
why?
Yeah. It doesn't track logically.
Thank you. That's what I'm saying.
That's what you're saying. Yep.
Next, Violet's brows rise at the next passage I read, and I go over it once more to be sure I've caught on to a pattern. That makes 3. And yet, she won't freaking reveal what it is that she's learned. And I'm getting so tired of this. Like, either tell us or don't, but quit with all this stupid, like, teasing of she learned something useful, but it can't be revealed to the reader yet. So we're just going to not say anything about it until she reveals it. And I'm like, so annoying.
Retweet times 1 billion. Retweet so hard. Dude, yes. It's like what I talked about last episode. It's not my secret to tell. Then don't involve me. Then don't include me. Don't even tell me that there's something to know.
Too many bookmarks at this point, but yeah. I also found it noteworthy that when Violet hears thunder outside again, she describes how her power rises within her like it's been called by a friend to come play. This leads to her grabbing her conduit, which now has a piece of alloy the same size as what's in the daggers, and she begins to imbue it. I definitely think that this is alluding to Violet's power growing stronger. It seems like in addition to lightning, we are getting thunder associated with their power as well. So then, just thinking like further down the line, is Violet's lightning signet going to expand more into storms as well?
I think it's possible. I mean, Violet's lightning is not really her true signet. Her true signet is power, and that's how it manifests. And so it's possible that she could extend it past the parameters of just lightning. Mm-hmm. It's an interesting thought. To be honest, I was focusing on how this made me nervous because, as I said in the last episode, I'm now on Stormwatch. So honestly, I'm a little worried Theophanie is close by. I'm a little worried we're going to have a fourth wing situation where they're doing the steamy hot thing. And then Garrett knocks on the door. He's like, guys, oh, no, for real. Something's really bad is happening. And so I'm kind of bracing myself for that. It could be just a storm, but I don't think so.
Well, yeah, especially when it's like it's inviting me to play. And I'm like,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, earlier in this episode, we were like, well, power calling to power. So I agree. Could definitely also just be Theophanie beckoning to her. Before she can linger too far on her intense training and her role as the main defense for Erasia, other than the failing wards, surprise, surprise, Zaddy is home.
Oh, thank God. Thank God.
So it's been 73 days, too long for this couple and us, and they immediately begin to make out.
I just need to get this off my chest. I know all authors have their go-to phrases, and I totally get that. I'm positive I have some go-to phrases on this podcast even, but I feel like every time they kiss, we always get this line, it's always closer and more when it comes to him. And at this point, it just makes me roll my eyes. I'm just like, oh my God, okay, we get it. I have some mixed feelings about this scene and how it plays out, and you will see that shine through in my analysis because I was just kind of like, okay, I don't know.
Okay, actually, it's funny that you say that because on a first read, I honestly didn't like this scene.
I didn't
felt
like it
came
either.
Out of freaking nowhere. It just felt really disjointed, and I felt like we were getting like this random moment of romance just because there needs to be some romance in here. And I'm like, no, I wanted to continue down the plot and like keep learning about these other things. And then we get this random spicy scene. And I'm just like, I wanted to fast forward through it, but I didn't, because then I was like, no, I have to listen because there's some important phrases coming in here and like some language that's being used that I do have thoughts about, but I agree with you. I just kind of wanted to blaze past it. I actually didn't really care in the moment.
It didn't do it. I know, and I hate to say that because, like, Rebecca is queen and she writes great intimate scenes. But this one, there's some wording choices and, like, the flow of it. We'll just keep going. We'll get there.
Yeah. Okay. On a much more hopeful note, so Xaden's return to Erasia was prompted by the fact that despite being outside the wards in Llewellyn and skating on his venin mental ice, he didn't reach for any power and instead managed to claw his way back to himself, aka he kept control.
Yay! Now, one of the lines that I know Rebecca likes to use that I do go absolutely feral for is Violet says, "He flew 9 hours in the wrong direction." And Xaden says, "Well, the fuck aware." And y'all know how I feel about that. I do feel good about that one. Okay. I'm not mad
That is a good line. Very iconic. We also very quickly learned that Xaden's magic number for how many days he needed to get to is 76 days, because he says it's twice Barlow's longest stretch without draining after his first significant channeling, the Cliff incident. And I believe this is a callback to War Games in Fourth Wing. I also found it cute that Sigale was the one that changed course as soon as she saw Xaden maintain control outside the wards, because she missed her man too. She needed to get back. Despite still having 3 days until his magic number, Violet is tired of waiting. And I thought it was funny when she says, "Open that door and I'll pin the edge of your pants to the wood and leave you there for the next 3 days." Oh, violence.
Oh, violence.
So, of course, finally, we are just about to get a full-on spicy scene, and per usual, I will not be going into details. However, you guys already know that there are some specific word choices and phrases that it will be picking apart.
Before we mention those, I do have an overarching thought for this spicy scene that I kind of hinted at earlier. And this will probably surprise many of you, but actually, I found a fair portion of this scene distracting, slightly annoying, and honestly, a little cringy. I love some declarations of love and passion, but it was really over the top in this scene. And some of it was so over the top, it took me out of the moment and I was physically recoiling. I do a lot of audiobook listening in my car because I'm always driving. And I was just like, make it stop. I didn't, like, never once have I not enjoyed doing a reread of a spicy scene, whether it's for science, for research, or, you know, personal enjoyment. But this one, I was like, I didn't love it.
No, I'm glad you said that because I felt the same way. And then I was like, maybe I'm just in a bad mood when I was listening to this or something.
You
and I just like
spicy.
wasn't enjoying it. But I totally agree that it was more distracting and it felt inorganic and just disjointed. If anyways, to get back on track, first of all, we get the rise in power with Violet and we continue to get very intense words being used to describe their desire for each other. Some of the classics include, "Even when I'm not entirely me," "Whatever I am still craves you, needs you, only wants you." We have the "mine, all mine," and then the "starved for you" phrases. But there are some other phrases in particular that really stuck out to me. Here's the first one. "My control when it comes to you is an illusion. You are the temple where I worship."
You love that God shit. You love it. As soon as I read that, I was like, oh God, here goes Lorraine. Okay, so before you read the other ones, this is part of a larger quote. And this is an example of one of the lines that was just so extra, I was physically recoiling in my seat. I'm going to read it to you because it just goes on and it drives me crazy. I cannot be the only one who feels this way. "My control when it comes to you is an illusion. You are the temple where I worship. I live for the clench of your thighs, your breathy little cries, and the feel of you coming around my..." I will not say that word in this podcast. "And above all else, the sound of my favorite 3 words from this mouth." And then it takes a breath. "Keeping my hands off of you has been the feat of my life." Italicize. "And you have the power to shred my discipline with a single fucking touch." And I'm cringing right now reading it out loud. Like, I'm sorry. Your soul is dying off in pieces. You watched your best friend die basically in your arms in Fourth Wing. You watched your father and the people you love get burned alive by dragons, and keeping your hands off Violet for 73 days has been the feat of your life. Oh my God. I can't with
I
this. Like,
roll. Yeah.
oh man, I roll physically recoiling. Like, guys, I love cheesy. I read like some really, and I mean terrible, like an enjoyable way, romance novels. And so I'm all for it. But this, and it's like sexual and emotion. I didn't like it at all. That's how I feel.
I agree. Also, I just realized I didn't realize that it rhymed.
What did?
The clench of your thighs and your breathy little cry.
Why does that make it even worse?
That's what I'm saying. Because I was like, oh my god, it
The
rhymed
clench of your
too.
thighs and your breath and little cries.
Oh my god, it sounds like a song.
It's terrible. Like he's trying to rap. Oh my god, it's awful. Okay. I didn't like it. I didn't like
My
it.
eyes are watering. I'm laughing so hard.
And guys, please know, I am
didn't
not
realize
bashing
that
Rebecca
it
Yarros. I'm
rhymed.
not an author. I don't know how hard it is, but I have to be honest. I value honesty on this podcast. There's no way Lorraine and I were the only ones who felt this way because it was just, I don't know,
anyways.
man. Thighs and cries, thighs and cries.
Sick.
Oh my god.
Now I'm just like thinking of that as like a
Like, how did that sound? You know, can you imagine
like
being hot and heavy
Xaden's
in the
mantra.
moment?
He's like writing back.
Thighs
He's
and
like
cries, thighs and cries.
thighs and cries, thighs and cries. Just
No
flying
wonder
back. Some thighs.
No wonder Sigil won't talk to him. She's had enough of that. She has to live in his head.
Like you're embarrassing.
Oh man.
Okay. Sorry. I just didn't realize that it rhymed when I read it. It just makes it so much funnier.
I'm telling you, I actually have had this thought. I feel like sometimes when I listen to the audiobook, it sounds kind of bad or I don't like it, or it's more emotional, it's more impactful. And then when I read it, it doesn't evoke the same feeling. And I actually have decided if I ever decide to write a fantasy book, which is living rent-free in my head, I am going to, before it's like fully submitted, I honestly would pay someone to record it, like audiobook record it, so I could listen to it because you notice things like that. A little bit, it depends on like the person reading it, but it changes how it sounds or the meaning, like tonal shifts are super important. And so, yeah, I didn't realize that until I put it out because I didn't notice it when I was reading.
I didn't either. Thighs and cries.
Thighs and cries. Thighs, cries, and fries, baby.
Xaden's mantra, thighs, cries, and goodbyes.
No. Okay, we can do this.
Anyways, okay, yeah. Whew. Now that we're done laughing, to get back on track, here's another line that stuck out to me. You have the power to shred my discipline with a single fucking touch. And I was like, no, but touch of Dune, perhaps? Touch of a god?
Girl,
touch of a goddess?
Get out of here with that. Okay.
No, listen. Just
okay,
listen to me, okay?
Okay.
Then, at the end of the chapter, the way he says my name, part moan, part rare, wrecks
okay,
me.
I'll give you that one.
And this continues on into the next chapter too, obviously, because we get like 2 chapters of this. I point these out because I have some more formal thoughts about this in relation to chapter 49's excerpt. But for now, a lot of Xaden's words about Violet are really taking more of a religious or God-related tone. I really, I think I've already planted my flag, but I'll plant another one, that there is something going on with their love, the bond that is related to the gods directly. Maybe it has to do with the power of the gods or the fact that Violet has been partially dedicated. Call me crazy or far-fetched, but like for real, the gods and Violet's dedication are related to why Violet and Xaden have such an intense love for each other. I cannot shake that feeling at this point. Yes.
I mean, we know the gods are more prevalent. The talk is more prevalent. And you know what? You've hooked me. I'm going to throw something crazy out there. But what if Xaden was partially dedicated to Loyal? And that's why he feels his love for Violet so intensely.
Chapter 49's excerpt, yes.
And the excerpt, love and war change people irrevocably. And they're the balance, love and war. Whoa. You know, I have no evidence to support that. As Lorraine said earlier, just vibes for days. But you know what? We're just throwing it out there. This episode, we're just throwing it out there.
Yes. I feel it in my thighs.
I hear it in your cries.
I hear your cries. Okay, on a lighter note, I did like the shadow play part of this spicy scene. And I'm glad that has become a key part of the spicy time for them. So,
Lorraine, you must be an intrinsic because you read my mind. It's funny because you and I were joking about this very early on in the book. And here we are. As much as I have complained about this particular spicy scene, let me be clear. I feel the same way Violet did. The shadow play was disturbingly hot, actually.
mm-hmm.
So I'm not mad about that. I would
Yeah.
like to see that incorporated in future scenes.
But I also think it has to be noted that Violet thinks he hasn't so much as lifted a finger to wield. He's doing all of this with his mind.
Hot.
Honestly, hot. But also, it seems like everyone is just getting stronger and stronger with their signets. Knowing Xaden is venin makes that, obviously quite terrifying. But everyone's signets are getting stronger. We've seen Mira's change. We've seen Riddick's change. Violet's is changing. Xaden's is changing. And so I'm just waiting for new things to pop up with people's signets at this point because gotta fight the evil. Need a stronger signet, I guess. So. And speaking of scary things, Xaden makes Violet prep some alloy daggers nearby that she can use against him if needed. In addition to that, Xaden wants Violet at full power so as not to take any chances. Violet tells Xaden, I choose you. I choose whatever risk this brings. I see every part of you. The good, the bad, the unforgivable. That's what you promised, and that's what I want, all of you. I can handle myself even against you if I have to.
See, yet another one physically recoiling.
It's giving Pokemon. Yeah. I will say it's also starting to sound just a little bit dragony, like with the I choose you part, as well as a little bit of like till death do us part action.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm wondering if later on in book 4 or 5, are we going to get some big scene where Violet and Xaden have to face off against each other? How fucking awful would that be?
No, I don't like that. Take that back.
But also, in line with the till death do us part situation, when are we going to get that scene here about them getting married or something? I really thought that was going to happen soon.
Yes, it's been foreshadowed.
We haven't heard a peep about it since Hedotus. And I'm like, is it happening? Is it not happening? What's going on?
It ain't happening. I don't think he would marry her while he's venin because he'll do the whole, like, you deserve to be with someone forever who's whole, but I'm too selfish to let you go, like that whole little speech. I don't know. I also thought it was interesting that Violet contradicts herself in this scene, and mostly I think it was just motivated by lust, so I feel her. She tells Riddick after they talk to the Irid she would never be able to hurt Xaden or wield her signet against him, but here with Xaden, she says, I can handle myself even against you if I have to. And I was like, girl, that's a lie. That is a lie. No, you won't.
Gotcha.
But I think she just wanted to get some. So she's like, I'm going to say whatever I need to.
Probably. I mean, I would too, so.
Oh, Lorraine. Fair enough.
Yeah. With Violet sufficiently armed and all their spicy talk out of the way, Xaden says, no more waiting. And to close out this chapter and carry us into the full spicy scene, music to our ears.
Was it though?
Because we just complained about this entire spicy stuff.
I mean, don't get me wrong. I did enjoy parts of it, but I just, chapter 49 was better than chapter 48. Chapter 48 was kind of, when they got to the good part, that was a little bit better.
Yeah. Anyways, okay. That ends chapter 48. Moving on to chapter 49. The excerpt. This is like the major excerpt that I think I was most excited about in this set of chapters. This one was from Major Worley's Guide to Appeasing the Gods, and it states that while most deities allow their temple attendants to choose when they serve to require a lifetime dedication, Dune and Loyal, for both war and love change souls irrevocably. So Dune and Loyal are particularly important deities, and if service to them is a lifetime dedication, then first of all, what does this mean for Violet? We know Violet still seemingly can choose her path, as the priestess said, but if she were to complete her dedication or something, that would mean that she'd have to serve for the rest of her life. I don't know what that entails, but that's a big commitment.
I would think that's exactly what it means. If she actually chose to complete the dedication, she would be a servant of Dune for life. Yeah.
So then this excerpt also had me completely rethinking basically everything about Violet's and Xaden's relationship. So we've talked several times about how many descriptions of Xaden seem really similar to Dune as well, or like Umbriel's emblem. And we know Umbriel worships Dune. And then I started wondering, is there some sort of favoritism from Dune or Loyal for Xaden as well? We know that Violet has a connection to Dune because of this like partial dedication situation. And we know that Loyal is the goddess of love. And considering how like deep the bond is between Xaden and Violet, I wouldn't actually be surprised if Xaden is like favored by Loyal or something as well, or there's a little bit of goddess of love play going on into the relationship too.
What if Talia took Xaden to be dedicated to Loyal when he was a child and he doesn't remember? Or took him to Loyal to be blessed? Because what did Talia not experience from Fen? Love. What do parents want for their children? Love. And they want them to have a better life than what they're having. And so maybe Talia was worried about that for Xaden because at that time, she would have thought his future would be to be the Duke of Tyrrendor, and she didn't want him to fall in the same trap that Fen did. Oh, okay.
Possibly.
I gotta be honest, this excerpt did nothing for me until I started reading your notes, and now hearing you say it, I'm like, oh, yes.
It's undeniable. Okay. Just wait.
Okay.
We're going to keep going though, okay?
Okay.
So all the things that Xaden says about, worshiping Violet and like the prayer thing and everything, and how they both tell the other that they belong to them or their souls are theirs. Like they both said stuff like that to each other. Maybe Xaden is particularly drawn to Violet because Violet is blessed by Dune or something through her partial dedication. And then once Xaden and Violet were linked, primarily first and foremost through their bond because of their dragons, but maybe something about that magic triggered an even deeper connection for them in particular because you also have the favoritism from the gods or like being touched by the gods or whatever, however you want to say it. And so it like sparked this deeper thing between them. If we are taking more of a literal interpretation of war and love, change souls irrevocably, then to me, that sounds like the gods are related to dealing with their souls. Xaden also refers to Violet as love. That's one of the things he calls her, which could very well have some double meaning as a reference to Loyal as well. Last but not least, we still haven't gone to Loyson yet, and they primarily worship Loyal there. If nothing else, Loyal has to be important now, knowing Dune and Loyal are the only deities that require lifetime dedications. Like, I don't think we got that information for shits and giggles,
Yeah. No, the excerpts are always intentional. And I definitely do not think we are done with the Isle Kingdoms. I feel very strongly we'll visit Loyson before the series is over. And we talked about that in the last episode too when they decided to skip it. What stood out to me from this excerpt is also the language connection between love and soul. The quote, "For both war and love change souls irrevocably." I still stand by the idea that there is no cure, but if there was, I think this excerpt points to the idea that love would be part of the cure because it changes a soul irrevocably. And what does becoming a venin do? Destroy pieces of your soul. And so I think the language there is indicative of something.
We have talked about love being a cure.
Love conquers all. As you said.
Okay, so the spicy scene commences. Bookmark that.
Overarching thought for this chapter. I know you're going to laugh at me, but why did I have the hardest time mentally figuring out what position they were in and how it worked logistically? You know that meme that's like the woman who like sees all the calculus equations around her and she has like this puzzled look on her face? That was me. I was like, wait, they were how? And I was like, this and moving my hand. I'm like, how did they? And then they put the what? And they did the what with the hands and the, I'm like,
yes,
what? I'm still not sure I totally understand it. I think I need a diagram.
There's some really funny like TikToks and stuff of people acting out the scenes. Have you seen those where they're like reading their book and they'll like stand on their chair and like position themselves how it's described?
Oh my
like
God.
They'll try to do it and they're
That's
really funny.
Hilarious. Yep, I know what I'm doing after this episode.
So thinking just overall about Violet and Xaden's deep love for each other, the excerpt from this chapter and many of the word choices in the past two chapters, it did get me thinking. We've already alluded to, I guess, a lot of these thoughts, but this may be 100% crazy, and actually it's like not a nice thought depending on how you look at it. But in relation to how Violet's power always rises and they have this addiction to each other during spicy time, I wonder if another reason Xaden is so drawn to Violet, especially as a venin, is actually because he can feel the power more intensely or differently because if Violet is favored or touched or whatever you want to call it by Dune, that has fundamentally altered the nature of the power that she has. I keep thinking about the priestess in Unbriel who said, "Do you not yearn for the temple?" Usually the touch creates such longing that you can't help but return. If Violet has been touched by Dune, then would other people who are touched by Violet, by extension, develop this yearning for like her power? I'm still on my god shit, okay?
I
I'm
know you are.
convinced that
Hey,
something about
everyone knows
like,
at this point, Lorena. It's
I
okay.
know.
You don't have to explain it. We know.
I just feel like even the priestess is alluding to some, like, a power that comes from the gods too. It's feeling more and more like that. So just to give some additional lines that stuck out in relation to this, Violet says, "What are you?" And then Xaden says, "Worshipping." We have "devote myself to his body the way he just did mine. My power, my body, my soul, it's all yours." I don't know. Too much. By the end of the scene, we are temporarily filled with relief to know that Xaden did not channel at all, not even a fingerprint. And for now, he is, quote unquote, stable. Big emphasis on for now.
Lorraine, as Darna said, don't ruin this for me.
Anyways, to close out this chapter, I do think we have a new my house, my chair, my woman. When Xaden says bathtub, then the dresser, then the bed.
No, boo. I mean, it's all
You don't
right.
think-
It's not even close to my house, my chair, my woman. No way.
I feel like
no
it
way.
is.
Nah. Text us. Tell us what you think. We should do a poll. Let's do a poll. No, you're going to get crushed. I'm telling you, nothing beats my house, my chair, my woman. Although I did take note that Xaden does seem to do some good work in chairs in general.
He does. He really does. But yeah, that was a pretty short chapter, actually, in analysis because it was mostly just spicy things. So.
Yep. Lots of spicy things. Just go and analyze it yourself in your free time.
And with that being said, that now concludes the assembly meeting. And now we just have our favorite moments to share.
All right. Our first favorite moment is a shared one between us. It is when they are first getting ready to attempt the battle mount. And Violet says, "Kind of wish you were a griffin so we could have sat this one out." And Taryn says, "Kind of wish I'd sat out threshing 2 years ago." And I love that. Yeah, Taryn he was not feeling it. He's like, "I had enough of your smart mouth today."
And on a similar Taryn note, I thought it was funny when Violet says, "Maybe we should wait a month and try when we're on the erasure rotation." And Taryn responds, "Or you could simply not break anything."
How helpful.
Like, I know, so helpful.
I loved when Violet says, "Unless you're still brooding," to Xaden. And he says, "It's a full-time occupation at the moment."
He does like to brood.
We love a broody boy.
Very on brand.
We love a broody boy.
My next favorite moment was actually a line from Felix. And it's when he says, "I do hate Basgiath, but not as much as I hate dying."
Fair. Totally
fair. Yeah. Yep.
My next one is actually from an excerpt. I love when Violet writes, "Or I can always join you in the assembly chamber. You did some of your best work on that throne." And I was like, fucking swoon.
On a more touching note between Dragon and Ryder, I just love the whole moment between Sleek and Sawyer. And I really like the quote that said, "Sleek huffs, then extends his leg, sliding his claw through the mud. Slowly, it lowers to a walkable degree of incline."
Aww.
And I was like, oh.
Similarly, I shared one between Lorraine and I. I love when Taryn said, "It would take a great deal more than a change of posture to dishonor me." And I was like, Taryn, you're so sweet.
My next favorite one is when they get to Erasia and Bodhi tells Violet, "We're home, bye. Act like it."
I also loved when Riddick sees Xaden and he goes, "Ooh, he used the wing leader voice."
Wing leader.
Even Riddick likes that. He's like, ooh.
Yeah. Yeah. And then my second to last one is from Violet, and it's during their little spicy scenes, and she says, "It wouldn't be the first time I raised a blade to you." And then Xaden responds, "I'm not sure what that says about us."
Toxic.
Blades are their thing. They have
well, not that kind of thing, but
well, yeah.
My second to last one is when Sawyer gets on Sleek and Violet says, "Now does it matter how you got there or only that he chose you?" And Sawyer says, "You know the answer to that already." And I want to cry just thinking about it again.
So cute. Yeah. And then last but not least, the end of chapter 49, when Violet says, "Are we going somewhere?" And Xaden responds, "Bathtub, then the dresser, than the bed.
Oh, mine is
And
also from the
scene.
spicy scene when Violet says, "It's disturbingly hot, actually." Agreed. Retweet,
Always.
Violet.
Yes. And yeah, that wraps up our favorite moments, and that officially ends our episode. So thank you all for joining us for another episode of the Booked on Fantasy podcast. As always, we are so glad you found us. So please leave us a review, subscribe to the podcast, and follow us on Instagram or YouTube to keep up with us on a daily basis. And that's all we've got for you guys today.
So stay violent.
And we'll catch you all next week. Bye.
Bye. And stay tuned for some bloopers. Xaden talks Lynx through it, and the squad takes Lynx to car, leaving Xaden with Violet. Or leaving Zehyllna.
Zehyllna.
I kind of dig that. I loved when Violet told him he had the Krell ability. Oh my gosh, okay. I loved when Violet told him he had the Krell. I didn't get it. Any storm could be created by Theophanie. By Theophanie.
Oh, wait, sorry.
Damn it, Lorraine.
No, it's funny because you said it up here, and then I said Birkenstock like later on in the chapters. Yeah, I was like Birkenstock Berlin.
At the end of the day, a common enemy unites all. And as you like to say, okay, that's not what Lorraine likes to say. I'm gonna bookmark it.